Chapter 743. What's this? Even Wang Yu was a little curious when he saw how reaching the peak of perfection valued this thing so much. How could someone with such amazing luck, like reaching the peak of perfection, be interested in it? The peak of greatness said, I won't hide it from everyone. This is a class change token. With it, I can change to a hero class. A class change token. Hearing the peak of greatness say this, Wang Yu immediately understood. There are only 7 hero classes in each faction, and each token was unique. It was definitely something that could not be more precious. Even if one reached the peak, they would not easily give it up. Wuji smiled. I didn't expect our mercenary mission to cause the Dark faction to suffer such a huge loss. Wang Yu was confused. What does this have to do with the Dark faction? Wuji laughed. Haha, losing a hero class for no reason isn't a loss. Wang Yu was speechless. Wasn't that right? With the peak of greatness skills, he could still be beaten by a newbie with godly equipment. What was the point of getting a hero class? No matter how powerful a class was, it would be a waste on him. The peak of greatness laughed. That's why the game is fair. Even if I can't do anything, as long as I have the ability, I can get what I want. The peak of greatness said, what do players with money say? The peak of greatness said, just like my IQ and luck. That's their advantage. The peak of greatness thought for a moment and said, from the degree of shamelessness, it does match your IQ. The peak of greatness continued. For this mission, I've offended the biggest guild in Cloud Mountain City. They're not chasing me now because they want to use me to complete the mission. Then, they'll intercept me at the NPC who's handing in the mission. That's why I want Boss Iron Ox to escort me back. Players had to talk to the NPC to hand in the mission. Once they did, the stealth skill would lose its effect. That was why even an assassin at the peak of greatness would be in a difficult position. The biggest guild? Wang Yu thought for a moment and said, it's a little troublesome to take you with me. If Wuji and the others go with me, the success rate may be higher. The job of bodyguard was not something a normal person could do without professional training. Even if Wang Yu was a peerless master, it was far easier for Wang Yu to kill 1,000 targets than to protect a rookie who had reached the peak of perfection. Don't joke around, Wuji said. The Cloud Mountain City is the main city of the Dark faction. It's different from our neutral main city. I'm afraid we won't even be able to enter the city. Is that so? Wang Yu was puzzled. Then can I go in? You can do it, reaching the peak of perfection said. Why? I heard that you seemed to be in the neutral camp. When they first fought the 100 Grassflower Fairy, Wang Yu did say that he was in the neutral camp. The neutral camp had always been considered as uncivilized people. Their strength was as strong as a wild crane, and they did things according to their own preferences. There was no such thing as dark or light. The people from the light and dark camps would not easily provoke these strong people. That was why Wang Yu, who was in the neutral camp, could freely enter and exit all the main cities. All right, Wang Yu spread out his hands and said, before that, I need to fix my weapon. Weapon? You don't have to worry about that. I can get you a pair of high-quality gloves. Reaching the peak of perfection, said confidently. Wang Yu waved his hands and said, that's not necessary. I'm still lacking a material. I don't know if you have it. What material? Godly meteorite. Wang Yu said, I've never heard of it. You know that I rely on my brain to make a living. I don't do physical labor. Reaching the peak of perfection, said helplessly. The main source of materials was from fighting bosses and mining. Reaching the peak of perfection didn't even think about fighting bosses. Mining was something that beginners would do. Moreover, godly meteorite was so rare that it was normal that he hadn't heard of it. At this moment, Exquisite Dream said, godly meteorite, that sounds a bit familiar. You've seen it for sale? Wang Yu asked in surprise. I think it's with you. Exquisite Dream said after thinking for a while. With me? Wang Yu said in disbelief. How come I don't know about it? At this time, Wuji also remembered and loudly said, did you forget? A few bosses dropped in the setting sun forest. Aren't those godly meteorite? When Wang Yu heard this, he flipped through the spatial ring. Indeed, there were 2 black godly meteorite stones lying in the spatial ring. The spatial ring didn't count as a backpack, so when he accepted the quest, the godly meteorite stones weren't displayed. Holy shit, looking for a donkey while riding on a donkey. I didn't think that this thing would be in my hands. This is great. When he saw the godly meteorite, Wang Yu's mood was as excited as if he had found a few $100s in his pocket while doing the laundry. All right, then let's go back first. Once you fix your weapon, we'll be on our way together. Reaching the peak of perfection originally thought that Wang Yu would be delayed for a while because of his weapon. When he saw that Wang Yu had gathered the materials, he was in a good mood. The hidden dungeon's EXP was especially abundant. It allowed Wang Yu, who had a 90% damage output, to rise to level 45. Even the few people who died along the way received a large amount of EXP. After returning to Yu Huicheng, reaching the peak gave out rewards to the others in Chuanjin. Holy shit, the advanced earth magic rock wall. I've made a killing. Ming Du, who had just obtained the epic grade clothing, almost jumped up when he saw the skill book that reaching the peak of perfection took out. Earth element magic casters were the most powerful of all the elements. Regardless of whether it was in terms of offense or defense, they were second to none. More importantly, the rock wall spell could change the terrain, and terrain-related spells always had powerful crowd control effects. For Radiant City, which lacked crowd control, this was undoubtedly the icing on the cake. Look at mine. Chun Xiang snapped his fingers, summoning a little bug. The bug flew around the group, and with another snap of his fingers, the little bug vanished into thin air. TSK, what's so great about this trick? Look at my clothes. To place one's pride was just about to show off the clothes he had just obtained when Chun Xiang said with a smile, "Vision sharing. Holy shit, I really want to be a magician. I'm a warlock. I really want to be a warlock." To place one's pride began to feel annoyed with his fighter class. Reaching the peak of perfection was indeed the most talented player. Anything he took out was already a huge sum. However, compared to the class change token, it was still far from it. Just as everyone was excitedly showing off the items they had just obtained, when it was Yin Lao Air's turn, Yin Lao Air fell silent. "Second bro, what did old Deng give you? Take it out and let us see." Everyone curiously asked Yin Lao Air. "It's a defensive skill that reduces damage. By the way, have you guys seen Old Cow?" Yin Lao Air asked. Yang Na said he went to the bank to get some materials to repair his equipment. Chapter 744. At this time, Wang Yu had already taken out the materials from the bank and came to the blacksmith shop. Since the Chuanjin station had just been destroyed, it would take a week for the infrastructure to be built. Therefore, Wang Yu could only find a place in the system blacksmith shop. Blacksmith was the most popular secondary profession in Rebirth, so the blacksmith shop was always full. The players waiting at the door for a stall had a frighteningly long line. Wang Yu waited for a long time, but the line didn't move at all. At this time, Wang Yu finally understood why all the guilds desperately wanted a station. Wang Yu didn't realize it before, but after waiting for a long time, she finally realized the convenience of the guild workshop. Nyogo. Just as Wang Yu was sweating profusely, a muffled voice suddenly sounded behind Wang Yu. Wang Yu turned around and saw Yin Lao Air staring at him with a smile. "Second brother, why are you here?" Wang Yu asked Yin Lao Air. "Hee, I heard you were making equipment, so I wanted to ask you for a favor," Yin Lao Air said as he took out his Divine God Shield and Xinyuan wood. There was a success rate for forging Xinyuan wood on equipment. The success rate for a master-level blacksmith was only around 30%, but the current blacksmith profession was only at the advanced level, so the success rate was pitifully low. Yin Lao Air heard Bao San mention the magic of Wang Yu's demonic forging technique. When he heard that Wang Yu wanted to repair his weapon, he followed and prepared to ask for Wang Yu's help. After all, no matter how unreliable Wang Yu was, he knew him better than others. More importantly, it cost money to find someone to forge Xinyuan wood, and it didn't matter who the money was spent on. After all, the goodies should be kept within the family. Wang Yu glanced at Yin Lao Air's shield and said awkwardly, "It's not that I don't want to help, but I don't know how long I'll have to wait in line." "That's easy." Yin Lao Air walked up to one of the players' consoles, took out a few gold coins, and said, "Brother, can you do me a favor?" Seeing that Yin Lao Air was even paying for a spot, the other players in the queue were immediately unhappy. Who the F asterisk CK are you? Line up at the back. Even God would have to wait to find out, wouldn't he? Yin Lao Air glanced at the man, pointed at the yin yang fish on his chest, and introduced himself. I'm Yin Lao Air from Chuanjin. May I know your name? When the loudest guys saw the logo on Yin Lao Air's body, they immediately shut up and quickly disappeared into the crowd. Ever since they defeated Pointing Sword in the Sky, Chuanjin's reputation had become even more fierce. These guys who came to the blacksmith shop were a bunch of pitiful people who didn't even have a guild. They didn't even have a guild. Who would dare to provoke these guys? Of course, Yin Lao Air was already being tactful. If it were Ming Du, Chun Xiang, and the other original Chuanjin bastards, they wouldn't even say a word. They would just throw an area of effect spell at them. Go ahead. I'll do it after you're done. When the player beside the forging table heard that Yin Lao Air was from Chuanjin, he displayed the wisdom that an adult should have. He didn't even take the money and quickly gave up his spot. When the people in the queue saw that Yin Lao Air had successfully squeezed in a spot, they didn't complain at all. This was how the game worked. The bigger the fist didn't mean the right, but the smaller the fist definitely meant the wrong. After Yin Lao Air forcefully stuffed the gold coins into the player's hand, he waved at Wang Yu, who was at the back of the queue, and said, "Come, there's a spot." Wang Yu lowered his head and awkwardly walked to the front of the stall. Wang Yu had never done something like this in front of so many people. At this moment, when he saw so many people staring at him, his face turned red. When the people below saw the same yin-yang fish on Wang Yu's chest, as well as Wang Yu's empty hands and tall and burly body wearing cloth armor, they suddenly thought of something, and their faces instantly became surprised. Could this be Guru Iron Ox? It can't be. Does Guru Iron Ox need to queue up to farm skills? In the eyes of ordinary players, the people from Chuanjin were incomparably fierce, especially Wang Yu, Chuanjin's #1 fighter, the legend of Yu Huicheng. They didn't think that Wang Yu would queue up at the back. Nonsense. Does Guru Iron Ox still need a farm skill from his subclass? Subclasses were usually trained by ordinary players. Under normal circumstances, super experts wouldn't waste time farming these things. Even if they did, their level wouldn't be high, and there was no need to specially train them. When he heard the players talking about him, Wang Yu's face turned even redder. "Give me your shield first," Wang Yu said to Yin Lao Air with a red face. "Don't you need to repair yours first?" Yin Lao Air asked. "You bought this seat, so do yours first," Wang Yu said. "Leave after you're done. I can't afford a lose face like this." Yin Lao Air was speechless, and once again took out the shield and the God's Origin wood. Wang Yu took the items from Yin Lao Air's hands and placed them on the console. When they saw the God's Origin wood on Wang Yu's console, everyone cried out in disbelief, "Holy shit, God's Origin wood! Could this be the legendary Advanced Blacksmith?" Players with the subclass of blacksmiths didn't have a good eye for anything else, but they were very clear about materials. Even Yin Lao Air knew about the God's Origin wood, let alone them. The God's Origin wood was a famous and valuable item. Even rich players didn't dare to use it carelessly. Usually, they would find an advanced blacksmith to help them forge the God's Origin wood on their equipment. However, the secondary professions in Rebirth were very difficult to train. Since the start of the game, the number of high-level blacksmiths could be counted on one hand. At most, there were no more than 5. Could it be that the Chuanjin sect still had a high-level blacksmith hidden among them? Everyone knew that the high-level potions on the market were made by people from Chuanjin. Now, there was an advanced blacksmith. Among the dozen or so people, there were 2 top-notch subclass players, a group of super experts, and a peerless expert. How much hidden strength did this small guild have? I don't think it's possible. There are 3 known advanced blacksmiths in the Orc tribe in the Dark faction, and 1 from all over the world. I've never heard of our Yu Huicheng having one, a player said doubtfully. If he's not an advanced blacksmith, then how do you explain the God's Origin wood on the control panel? Someone retorted. Maybe Chuanjin's people aren't lacking in money. Someone else began to speculate. At this time, Wang Yu had already started working. Opening the magic forging interface, Wang Yu placed a shield on it. 4 options appeared in the control panel: forge, smelt, recast, and process. Originally, Wang Yu only had the first three options for magical refinement. The last option was only available after Wang Yu had learned intermediate engineering in the Atlan dungeon and raised his magical refinement to the advanced level. Forging the god's origin wood on the equipment was the process option. Fortunately, Wang Yu had learned intermediate engineering. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to help Yin Lao Air. Opening the process option, he placed the god's origin wood on the control panel. System notification. You will use advanced magic forging to strengthen the god's origin wood to the advanced divine shield. Please select mode. At the same time, two options appeared in front of Wang Yu. Chapter 745. 1. System Mode 2. Manual Mode, huh? Wang Yu was surprised to see that there are different modes for alchemy. He did not expect that there would be such a special feature after reaching the advanced level of the subclass. However, when he thought about it, it made sense. The subclasses in Rebirth were designed according to the classes in real life. Take forging as an example. In ordinary online games, players would simply toss in materials and wait for a progress bar to appear. What came out of it depended on fate. However, it was different in Rebirth. From smelting to assembling, players had to do everything personally. Even if the system gave a probability, it was only a symbolic value. This value was also closely related to the player's proficiency. As long as the player was skilled enough, the probability would increase. Every blacksmith player had to perform countless operations to advance. If one had the willpower to train their blacksmith skill to the advanced level, they would probably be able to forge in real life. At this time, it was obvious that the manual mode allowed players to perform at their best. From this, it could be seen that playing this game was not completely useless. At the very least, one could learn a trade. Wang Yu had only used alchemy a few times. He had relied on skill books to level it up. His proficiency was slightly lower than that of a blacksmith who had trained properly. Hence, Wang Yu opened the system mode. After opening the system mode, a small line of text appeared. You will use advanced alchemy to enhance the god's origin wood on the advanced god shield. The first enhancement success rate is below 30%. The second enhancement success rate is below 10%, and so on. Do you wish to enhance? 30%. Wang Yu could not help but purse his lips when he saw the success rate. The god's origin wood was not a cheap item. The first enhancement success rate was already so low, and the higher the enhancement, the lower the success rate. Wasn't this a bottomless pit of money? Thinking up to this point, Wang Yu switched the game mode to manual mode. The following notification changed. You will use advanced alchemy to enhance the god's origin wood on the advanced god shield. Do you wish to enhance? It seemed that the system removed the probability of enhancing in manual mode. Players had to rely entirely on their forging skills. Wang Yu carefully recalled the process of making equipment for Bao San last time. He gritted his teeth and chose manual mode, then clicked on confirm. Immediately after, a groove in the shape of the god's origin would appear on the divine god's shield on Wang Yu's interface. System notification. Insert the god's origin wood into the groove with appropriate force. Not count. 0 to 1. Wang Yu picked up the god source wood and placed it in the groove. Then, he lifted the hammer and gently tapped it. Pa! Wang Yu hammered down, but the shield did not budge at all. The god origin tree, on the other hand, was reduced to dust by Wang Yu's hammering. System notification. Insufficient strength. Embedding failed. Luck +1. Wang Yu, you failed on your first try? I say, isn't he a senior blacksmith? That's hard to say. Maybe he grew up eating experience books. When the onlookers saw this scene, they couldn't help but gloat. For an advanced blacksmith, embedding the god source wood for the first time wasn't difficult. The success rate was usually 80 to 90%. If he failed on his first try, aside from luck, there was only one possibility. He was like Wang Yu, eating skill books to reach the advanced level. Generally, this kind of blacksmith was like a LOL player who was replaced by someone else. No matter how high his rank was, he was only good-looking. He was the type of person that people despised. When they saw Wang Yu fail, most of the onlookers only had one comment in their hearts. He's been exposed. As for Yin Lao Air, everyone's comment was, serves you right. Show off. At this time, Yin Lao Air's face was a little pale. He said worriedly, "Nyo Gu, is your skill not good for this? If it really doesn't work, I'll find someone else." "You don't understand." Wang Yu waved his hand and said, "This thing is very technical. Let me try again." As he spoke, Wang Yu picked up the hammer and hammered it again. A red light flashed on the shield, and the god source would turn to dust again. System notification. You used too much force, embedding failed, luck +1. Uff. When they saw Wang Yu's second piece of god source would disappear, the audience couldn't help but laugh. The first failure could be attributed to bad luck, but the second failure was definitely a technical problem. Yin Lao Air was a little anxious. He hurriedly said, Yo Gu. Why don't we call it a day?" The god source wood was something that had a price, but no supply. Yin Lao Air had gone through a lot of trouble to get his hands on 5 pieces, and he had dreamed of wearing a divine weapon as soon as possible. Wang Yu's 2 failures had shattered Yin Lao Air's heart. It had to be known that the success rate of enhancing the god source would decrease the higher the level, but Wang Yu had failed twice on his first try. At this rate, he would use up all 5 pieces. Wang Yu rubbed his chin and said, "I think I've reached the threshold of strength. Let me try again." Yin Lao Air was a little conflicted. He was the one who had found Wang Yu. If he stopped halfway, it wouldn't be nice no matter how he looked at it. Even though he was very close to Wang Yu, Yin Lao Air was a little embarrassed to refuse Wang Yu's request. Seeing Yin Lao Air's expression, Wang Yu smiled and said, "Don't worry. You have to trust me." "Fine. Continue." Yin Lao Air gritted his teeth and finally made his decision. Without Wang Yu, there would be no god source wood. It was just 5 pieces of god source wood. If they were gone, then so be it. Yin Lao Air threw caution to the wind. Wang Yu placed the 3rd piece of god source wood on the shield. He picked up the hammer again and gently swung it down. A layer of green light flashed on the shield. System notification. Embedding successful. Level requirement of divine, shield -5. Success. Success. Yin Lao Air had been staring at the shield since the moment Wang Yu picked up the hammer. When he saw the light of embedding success on the shield, tears flowed down his face. They were tears of excitement. Everyone below the stage sympathized with Yin Lao Air's excitement. Poor child. 3 pieces of god source wood, and only 1 successful embedding. His heart must be old. At this time, Wang Yu picked up another piece of god source wood and placed it in the control panel. Using appropriate strength, he inserted the god source wood into the groove 3 times. Number of strikes, 0/3. Wang Yu asked Yin Lao Air, "Do you want to continue? Are you confident?" Yin Lao Air couldn't help but ask. 90%. Wang Yu said. "Then continue." "Okay." Wang Yu nodded, and the hammer in his hand struck 3 times. Dang, dang, dang. The strikes were continuous and rhythmic, and 3 green lights flashed on the shield. System notification. Embedding successful. Level requirement of divine, shield -5. As the green light flashed, the people on and off the stage instantly fell silent. Everyone, including Yin Lao, looked as if they had lost their souls. After a long while, someone below said, "The second blessing was successful in one go? How? How is this possible?" Chapter 746. Although the players in the audience had never fought a god's origin tree before, the god's origin tree was too famous. Even if they had never eaten pork before, they would at least have seen a pig run. Therefore, everyone was very familiar with the embedding of the god's origin tree. The first embedding of the god source wood was very easy. As long as the god source wood was hit with the same strength as usual, it would be considered a success. A skilled blacksmith could basically complete it. However, the second embedding of the god source wood was the real beginning. The difficulty of embedding this time was not just 1 level higher. This was because the number of hits had increased from 1 to 3. In other words, the original strength of 1 strike had now been reduced to 3 strikes, no more and no less. If there was a single mistake, it would result in failure. Adjusting the strength of the original hammer strike to 1/3 of the original strength, an ordinary person would have to rely on luck to succeed even once, let alone 3 times in a row. If a blacksmith did not devote himself wholeheartedly to his forging career, he would definitely not be able to do this job. From this, it could be seen that the control of hammer strength was the standard for a blacksmith to qualify. The success rate of the second embedding of the God Source would had also become a benchmark to evaluate a blacksmith's ability. Wang Yu had used as many as 3 times to embed the first God Source wood. In the eyes of the audience, he was just a mediocre blacksmith. Who would have thought that he would pass the second embedding in one go? Furthermore, Wang Yu's 3 consecutive hammers did not have any gaps in between. Lifting the hammers and hammering them was done in one breath. There was not the slightest bit of luck involved. This kind of confidence from lifting the hammers and making the final decision made everyone's jaws drop. Could it be a fluke? Someone said in disbelief. It cannot be helped. Wang Yu's 3 strikes were too shocking. The people below the stage had been hanging around in blacksmiths for a long time, so their eyes were definitely much sharper than ordinary people. If Wang Yu had really done it with his own ability, then his control of strength would definitely be shocking. Who knows? There's still one last God Source wood on the stage. Let's see how many times he can succeed in the third embedding. At this point, everyone below the stage turned to look at the God Source wood on Wang Yu's workbench. Even the other blacksmiths, who were completely focused, put down the hammers in their hands and stared at Wang Yu's workbench. Wang Yu calmly picked up the God Source wood and unhurriedly placed it on the control panel. System notification. Insert the God Source wood into the groove 9 times with an appropriate amount of force. Number of strikes, 0/9. Note, the God's origin tree is too powerful. If the embedding fails, it will return to +1 status. TSK. What a scam. Wang Yu could not help but sigh when he saw the notification. His third embedding was already like this. It seemed like even a rich player wouldn't dare to use the God's origin wood for fun. If the success rate was too high, the rich players would create a full set of level 100 equipment. Wouldn't that destroy the balance of the game? When that happened, the game wouldn't be far from shutting down. Wang Yu shook his head, then sent the system prompt to Lao Air and asked, "How is it? Do you still want to try?" Right now, the level requirement for the Divine God Shield was level 50, and Lao Air was currently level 43. If Wang Yu could succeed this time, then Lao Air would be able to use the godly weapon of his dreams in 4 to 5 days. If he failed, the level requirement would return to level 55. 5 levels after level 50 was definitely not something that could be achieved in a week or 2. Should he give it a shot? Or should he just give up? When Lao Air saw the notification, he rubbed his hands together and began to struggle. Of course, those who had been in Xuanjin all had one characteristic, and that was that they were full of desperados. They liked to gamble big. Even someone like Lao Air, who had joined halfway, liked to play exciting games under the influence of what he had seen and heard. How confident do you think you are? Lao Air asked Wang Yu. Lao Air had the shrewdness unique to people from the Central Plains. Just now, Wang Yu said that he was 90% confident that the second embedding would succeed on the first try. It could be seen that Wang Yu had already figured out the method. Therefore, at this time, even if Wang Yu was 10% confident, Lao Air still dared to let Wang Yu continue. 100%. Wang Yu said with a faint smile. What? Nyogu, you're not joking, are you? Lao Air's body swayed when he heard this, and he almost fell. The difficulty of the third embedding was much harder than the second. During the second time, Wang Yu was still 90% confident. How did it become 100% now? Do you think I'm joking? Wang Yu said. No, but why? Wang Yu smiled faintly and said, because practice makes perfect. Lao Air was completely speechless. Lao Air did not know that the highest realm of martial arts was to control and withdraw at will. The first embedding was when Wang Yu was testing the hammering force. For Wang Yu, that was the most uncertain time. Now that Wang Yu had succeeded in the second embedding in a row, he had an accurate idea of the hammering force. For a master like Wang Yu, dividing the force into 9 parts was a piece of cake. Then continue. Lao Air wiped his sweat and said, "Okay." Wang Yu nodded and lifted the iron hammer on the operating table. Seeing that Wang Yu was really going to embed the third time, everyone calmed down and focused on the hammer in Wang Yu's hand. Dang, dang, dang. Wang Yu's hammer lightly knocked on the divine god's shield, letting out a crisp and rhythmic sound. The continuous hammering sound did not stop at all as it hit the shield. Thinking of this, all the blacksmiths silently counted the number of hammers. 9 hammers fell, and a green light lit up on the divine god's shield. System notification: embedding successful. Divine god's shield level requirement -5. All right, here you go. Wang Yu handed the divine god's shield to Yin Lao Air. But this time, Yin Lao Air was completely dumbfounded. Honestly speaking, when Yin Lao Air saw Wang Yu's solo and epic boss, he did not have as much of an impact as this scene. After all, Wang Yu was a martial arts expert, a genuine battle master. Towards Wang Yu's strength, Yin Lao Air was mentally prepared, but blacksmithing and martial arts were clearly worlds apart. Could it be that Wang Yu's ancestors were also blacksmiths? Not only Yin Lao Air, seeing the green light rise, the surrounding players also fell silent again, and the silence lasted longer than before. This is the legendary god of crafts, right? After a long while, a player finally opened his mouth and said, "God of crafts, God of crafts." Following that, a tidal wave of applause, accompanied by the shouts of God of crafts, sounded wave after wave. It must be known that life profession players, especially those who were diligent in this path, had always been very confident in their own abilities. To confer the title of God to others, they had to be completely conquered by the other party's skills. Wang Yu's final 9 hammer embedding was still incomparably continuous, completely crushing the word luck, letting all the blacksmiths feel what it meant to be unattainable, unreachable. The title of God of Crafts was well-deserved. Chapter 747. Hearing everyone's shouts, Wang Yu awkwardly looked at the real God of Crafts, Simba, who was sitting at the foot of the wall. In the eyes of others, Simba was just a silent NPC, but Wang Yu knew his true identity. Unexpectedly, God of Crafts Simba took the initiative to smile at Wang Yu. Then, Wang Yu received a system notification. You have obtained the recognition of a certain number of players with the blacksmith profession and the main city's God of Crafts. You have unlocked the hidden achievement God of Crafts Smile and obtained the title God of Crafts. God of Crafts Special Title: Strength plus 50 Vitality plus 50 Agility -25 Intelligence -25 Special Effect. Chance to upgrade equipment's grade increased by 20%. The achievement system was also a major feature of the online game. Normally, achievements could only be unlocked when the system's specified conditions were met. Unexpectedly, the achievement God of Crafts Smile required the player to cooperate. In comparison, it was quite immersive. Apart from a decent increase in attributes, the title also had a 20% chance to upgrade equipment's grade. For a blacksmith, a 20% chance to upgrade equipment's grade was already very impressive. After all, even a Grandmaster Blacksmith only had a 30% chance to upgrade equipment's grade. With the addition of the 20% chance, an average of 1 out of 2 could upgrade equipment. From this, one could see the importance of this attribute. Nyogu, I really don't know how to thank you. Yin Lao Air had seen the shield before. When he saw that the god's shield had a level requirement of 45, his excitement was indescribable. If it wasn't for the fear of being killed by Wang Yu, he might have hugged Wang Yu and bitten him. Wang Yu said, "It's nothing. If it wasn't for the fact that I wasn't familiar with the strength at the beginning, I wouldn't have wasted it." "No, Nyogu, I'm already very satisfied to be able to upgrade 3 pieces. Anyway, I'm only 2 levels away. As long as I work hard, I'll be able to equip it in 2 or 3 days," Yin Lao Air said excitedly. "Okay, then hurry up and level up. I'm going to repair my weapon." After saying that, Wang Yu took out 2 broken sticks and carefully placed them on the operating table. Then, he began to take out the materials. Wang Yu had already asked the hermit about it. The process of repairing a weapon was very simple. All she had to do was open the repair option in the forging interface and throw in the damaged weapon and materials. The system would then automatically generate a new weapon. However, at that moment, Craftsman God Simba suddenly said, there are so many good materials. If we don't make use of them, it will be a waste. When Wang Yu heard this, he quickly stopped and turned his head to ask, Master, I thought you didn't know how to repair my weapon. Simba laughed and said, Haha, I really can't repair your weapon, but don't you think it's a waste to use these materials to repair a weapon? Wang Yu looked at the pile of materials in his bag and rubbed his nose awkwardly. These rare materials were collected by evildoers run wild in 300 main cities. Even if they were used to reforge a divine weapon, they would be quite rich. It was indeed a waste to use them to repair a weapon. Actually, I can't say much about your matters. However, since you have the title of craftsman god, you can't disgrace this title. Simba continued to ask slowly, Do you know the essence of craftsman god? Wang Yu silently shook his head. As a blacksmith, Wang Yu is not qualified, let alone a craftsman god. Simba said, The so-called essence of craftsman god is to use the materials to the extreme. Even the simplest materials can be used to create outstanding weapons. My teacher once used iron, ore, and flax to create a divine weapon that could grow. Divine weapon? Wang Yu heard this and couldn't help but be surprised. Iron, ore, and flax were the lowest grade materials. Other people could use these two materials to create a divine weapon, but Wang Yu used tons of rare materials to repair a weapon. They were both craftsman gods, but Wang Yu was obviously a little overconfident. That's right, it's that warrior's sigh of yours. Master Martial God has brought it through countless battles, and it has surpassed the concept of a divine weapon. However, the main material of this weapon is iron ore, so it is inevitable that it will break. Wang Yu carefully pondered over Simba's words, then asked, You mean, you want me to reforge this weapon? Yes. When I first saw this weapon, I thought about how powerful it would be if its main material wasn't black iron ore. Although you definitely can't compare to my teacher, young man, I have high hopes for you. Simba nodded at Wang Yu with satisfaction. Hearing Simba's words, Wang Yu hurriedly put the two broken rods on the operating table into the recasting column. Then, a row of material boxes appeared in the recasting column. The position of the main material showed that it was a metal no lower than iron ore. The other material boxes did not clearly state what materials were needed. Sure enough, as Simba said, Warrior's Sai was really made of iron ore. Wang Yu didn't think that he was as good as Simba's teacher, so he wouldn't be stupid enough to throw a few pieces of iron ore in. After all, the attributes of a weapon were directly related to the material. If he threw iron ore in and the recast Warrior's Sai was a level 1 weapon, who would he cry to? Thinking of this, Wang Yu threw a stack of star iron into the main material box. Star iron was a rare ore. Ordinary players would put in one by one when they created equipment. If evildoers run wild saw Wang Yu's prodigal act of throwing a stack in as the main material, he would definitely cry to death. After putting the main material in, although the recasting button had lit up, the row of material boxes under the main material did not dim, which meant that he could still throw in materials. Wang Yu naturally had no shortage of materials. Under normal circumstances, the more materials he put in, the better the attributes of the equipment. Therefore, Wang Yu put in all the rare materials in his bag without hesitation. At this moment, another box appeared at the bottom of the material box, and it prompted, Please put in the sacrifice. Hint, the higher the level of the sacrifice, the higher the level of the recast equipment. Seeing this, Wang Yu took off the legendary ring on his hand and put in the martial artist's glory. Although the martial artist's glory was a piece of legendary equipment, its attributes had long fallen behind the times. Wang Yu usually used it as a mobile warehouse. Since the grade of the recast equipment was related to the sacrifice, wouldn't it be perfect to transfer the grade of the martial artist's glory to the warrior's Sai? It was easy to learn bad things. Wang Yu had been with the guys in Xuanjin for a long time, so he was used to taking advantage of the system's loopholes. However, the system was not stupid. After Wang Yu put the ring in, the system prompted again. The sacrifice is not perfect. If the equipment is not perfect, the system will not be responsible. Chapter 748. The dagger was the dark gold wind tooth blade. It was also the weapon with the highest level in Wang Yu's bag. More importantly, this weapon was equipped with assassin skills. To Wang Yu, it was no different from a white-gray dagger. He would not feel the pinch if he threw into the bag. Bloodwolf, on the other hand, should be crying. He was still thinking of ways to get the dagger back from Wang Yu. This time it was over. Wang Yu treated it as a consumable. Only the prodigal young Master Wang would be able to use a dark gold weapon as a consumable. After all, dark gold equipment was hard to come by, not to mention it was a weapon. Furthermore, it was a top-tier weapon for the most popular assassin profession. If this level 40 wind-tooth blade was thrown into the market, it would probably cost at least 10,000 gold. If anyone knew that Wang Yu had done this, they would probably be so angry that their hands would tremble. After placing the dagger in the sacrifice column, Wang Yu was about to click on recast when he suddenly realized that there were 2 empty slots onto the sacrifice column. Wang Yu reached out and clicked on the empty slot. The empty slot showed blueprint column. The warrior's sai can be transformed into various weapon forms for battle. Using the weapon blueprint, the weapon's form can be increased. It can be done like this. Seeing the introduction in the blueprint column, Wang Yu suddenly became excited. Currently, the warrior's sai could only be changed into 4 forms: sword, staff, glove, and heaven and earth blade. For the various monsters in Rebirth, these weapon forms were far from meeting Wang Yu's needs for weapons. Usually, Wang Yu had to get his own long and short swords. Moreover, there was only one backup weapon column, which was especially restrictive for Wang Yu. Recasting a weapon and adding weapon forms was a pleasant surprise for Wang Yu. Seeing this option, Wang Yu put down everything on the control panel and asked the civil officials below the stage, "Who has a weapon blueprint? I'll take it." Blacksmiths usually did not lack blueprints. Now that Wang Yu was their idol, everyone raised their hands when they heard Wang Yu shout, I have." Seeing that everyone was so enthusiastic, Wang Yu was flattered and said, "Don't push, I have to look at the blueprint first. I have a sword blueprint," the player at the front said. Swords were one of the most important weapons in the sword and magic era. Warriors and knights could use swords, and even daggers could be used as single-handed swords. Warriors were also the most popular profession apart from thieves, so the demand for swords was even higher than daggers. Basically, every blacksmith would have a few sword-type blueprints on them. "Sorry, I don't need this." Wang Yu shook his head. Martial artist sai had the form of a sword and the form of a universe blade. It could be used with 1 or 2 hands, so sword-type weapons were not needed. "Then what do you need? Let me see if there are any," the player said enthusiastically. Wang Yu thought for a moment and said, "It's more unorthodox. Spear? Scepter?" Speaking of unpopular weapons, the 2 weapons of the knight class were definitely the most unpopular. Ordinary knight players usually follow the trend of using swords or shields. There were not many who used spears or scepters. "I don't need this either." Wang Yu wiped his sweat. The spear and scepter could be replaced by the stick form. There was no need to waste a slot. At this time, Wang Yu suddenly realized that he had no need for ordinary standard weapons at all. What he needed, such as long and short swords, were basically not available in the game. Just as Wang Yu was feeling depressed, the player who had just given up a spot to Wang Yu suddenly pointed at Simba and said, "I remember that old blacksmith once gave a player an item. It was said that he could design his own weapon." Design his own weapon. Hearing that player say this, Wang Yu's mind flashed. He then took out a set of wrinkled sheepskin and asked, "Are you talking about this?" "Yes, this is the sheepskin blueprint." "Oh, it's you. I was wondering why you looked so familiar," the blacksmith said excitedly after seeing the sheepskin blueprint. Hearing that player say this, Wang Yu also remembered. When he first came to the blacksmith shop, he saw this little blacksmith. After that, the little blacksmith was here several times to hand his quests. Although the 2 of them did not know each other, they could be considered acquaintances. It was just that after Wang Yu did not come for a long time, and the 2 of them had changed their equipment, that he did not remember him for a while. What a coincidence. I didn't think you would still be here," Wang Yu said with a smile. The little blacksmith touched the back of his head and said, "I have never left." "Never left." Wang Yu heard this and was stunned for a moment. "What's your name? I'll add you as a friend." "Job 345. Wang Yu opened the search bar and entered his ID. Sure enough, the little blacksmith was only level 10. Wang Yu couldn't help but be secretly surprised. When Wang Yu first met this little blacksmith, it was only a few days after the game opened. Now that the game has been open for a few months, he has never left or leveled up. What kind of perseverance does he have? Damn, you are. Seeing Wang Yu's ID, Chopper was so shocked that he quickly covered his mouth. It's me. What level are you now? Wang Yu asked Chopper. Chopper said, my blacksmith proficiency has reached the advanced standard for a long time, but because my level is too low, I couldn't complete the blacksmith promotion quest. So I've been stuck here. Wang Yu was shocked. From the players' discussion, Wang Yu knew that there were only 4 advanced blacksmiths in the game, and all of them were specially provided by the major guilds. Chopper, on the other hand, relied on himself to reach this level. He was definitely a genius. Thinking about this, Wang Yu asked Chopper, do you know how to design weapons? To be able to stay in the blacksmith industry for so long without getting tired of it, it was impossible to do so if one didn't love it. Designing weapons was naturally the pursuit of a professional blacksmith. Chopper nodded. Let's make a deal. Wang Yu said, how about you design 2 weapons for me, and I'll get someone to complete the promotion quest for you. Currently, dungeon items were still the mainstream in the market. The role of a blacksmith was still lacking. Ordinary people didn't have a sales channel like Mu Zixien, so their main source of income was to buff weapons or sell finished products to workshops. However, renting stalls and buying materials and blueprints was also a large expense, so their income wasn't high. It was normal for them to not have the money to complete the promotion quest. Looking at Chopper's equipment, it seemed like he made it himself. For a blacksmith to not starve to death without the support of a guild, it could be said that he was quite capable. Wang Yu didn't do this on a whim. Really? That's great. Chopper was overjoyed. Being able to design a weapon myself is my greatest wish. Seeing that Chopper's expression wasn't because he wanted to be promoted to an advanced blacksmith, but because he wanted to make an original weapon, Wang Yu was moved. This was the spirit that a blacksmith should have. Thinking about this, Wang Yu handed the sheepskin blueprint to Chopper. Chopper took the blueprint and excitedly caressed it as he asked Wang Yu, which type does Ox God prefer? Chapter 749. Long and Short Swords? The Ox God is talking about the jagged sword, right? I didn't expect you to use such a difficult weapon, Chopper said in surprise. You know about the jagged sword? Wang Yu was no less surprised than Chopper. In today's society, there were not many people who knew about weapons compared to Kung Fu. Even those who learned Kung Fu might not know about such an obscure weapon. My grandfather told me about it, Chopper said. Oh, your grandfather knows Kung Fu? Wang Yu asked curiously. Although only the 4 major families in the Kung Fu world had a long history, there were still some old-school martial artists who insisted on passing down their heritage. How can people like us know about that? My grandfather made weapons for people, but during my father's generation, he could only make farming tools. Technology is so advanced now, and I can't even make farming tools anymore. I can only enjoy myself in the game. Chopper smiled bitterly, his eyes full of regret. Sigh. Wang Yu patted Chopper's shoulder empathically. Wang Yu understood the sorrow of losing his heritage because it was the same for Kung Fu. In recent years, the country had been vigorously supporting the inheritance of some old skills, but times were changing, and some things that were no longer needed would eventually be eliminated. Once they were eliminated, there would be no one to pass down their heritage. Many years later, when people remembered these things, they would have already disappeared or been claimed by some country. Wasn't that a tragedy? Martial arts families and blacksmithing families were basically related. Martial arts had already become a legend, let alone weapons. If the skin was gone, how could the hair be attached to it? After the small talk, Chopper's eyes narrowed. He took out a quill and carefully sketched on the parchment paper. As expected of someone who knew about this industry, ordinary people might not even know what the jagged sword was, but Chopper's pen was like a god, and he quickly sketched out a long and a short sword. The long sword was thin, and the handguard wasn't particularly long. Instead, it was curved inwards to make it easier to hook weapons. The short sword was like a fork, and there was a ring at the end of the hilt to make it easier for the long sword to hook and hook weapons. Looking at the blueprint, Wang Yu was excited. That's right, this is the real jagged sword. It's much more pleasing to the eye than the pirated goods I have. In the next moment, Chopper had also completed the 3D drawing. Wang Yu looked at the two swords in surprise. Chopper's design was different from the usual circular ones. This one was shaped like a club and slightly curved inwards. Not only was it beautiful, but it also helped with hooking. The design was very ingenious. I like this plum blossom. Wang Yu looked at the drawing and said to Chopper, I thought of it myself. Chopper smiled and handed the blueprint to Wang Yu. Then he asked Wang Yu, what else do you need? Let's add another shield. Wang Yu said excitedly as he took the blueprint. As the boss's level increased, there were more and more AoE spells. Wang Yu's evasion became more and more difficult, so he needed a shield. Okay, Chopper nodded and began to draw the blueprint. Very quickly, a shield was drawn. The shield that Chopper designed was not the 2-meter-tall tower shield that shield bearers used. Instead, it was a circular shield with a diameter of less than a meter. The small design was very suitable for pugilist classes. Moreover, the shield was surrounded by a circle of sharp blades. Not only could it be used for defense, but it could also be used for offense. Not bad, not bad. Wang Yu took the shield blueprint and smiled until her eyes became slits. To be honest, ever since she entered the game, Wang Yu had never seen an equipment design that gave her such a sense of familiarity. After placing all the materials and offerings back into the control panel, Wang Yu placed the two blueprints inside. After thinking for a moment, he added the God of Crafts title and chose to recast it. Please fill in the name of the blacksmith or leave a message. When a weapon's grade was higher than gold, it would be engraved with the blacksmith's name or a message as a souvenir. It seemed that Wang Yu's weapon's grade was definitely not lower than gold. Chopper 345, Iron Ox. Wang Yu casually entered their names. The control panel began to cast the forging. Because the materials and blueprints Wang Yu used were too high-end, the system took a full 30 seconds to cast. After 30 seconds, a purple light emitted from Wang Yu's control panel. At the same time, a system announcement appeared. Players Chopper 345 and Iron Ox have worked together to forge the epic artifact Martial Scholar's Sai. Their names will be recorded in the history books. The announcement repeated 3 times. Not only were the players in front of Wang Yu's group stunned, but the players in other locations were also stunned. Damn, an epic artifact? He forged it. Didn't they say that the highest grade a player could forge was dark gold? The highest grade a player could forge was indeed dark gold. However, Wang Yu had recast it using the blueprint of an original weapon. I know Iron Ox. Who's Chopper 345? Is he one of the 4 advanced blacksmiths? Some people also noticed the chopper behind Wang Yu's name. I don't know. I've never heard of him. Just when everyone was wondering who Chopper was, Chopper excitedly tugged at Wang Yu's sleeve and said, God Ox, you actually added my name. Wang Yu said, the weapon was designed by you, so of course I have to write your name. I only collected some materials. I don't know how to thank you. Chopper clenched his fists and cried. He didn't know what to say anymore. To Wang Yu, it was just a matter of inputting a few more words. However, to a profession player, the significance of Wang Yu's actions was absolutely immeasurable. Chopper had been forging weapons every day, so he knew how difficult it was. As a professional blacksmith, he didn't have the time to run a business. All his money was earned by the workshop. Apart from daily expenses, he wouldn't have any value left. A professional profession player's goal was to earn money. Not only did Chopper not earn any money, but he also had to pay for his own card. However, all of this changed just now. With Wang Yu's help, Chopper became one of the first epic artifacts forgers. The 4 advanced blacksmiths wouldn't be able to raise their heads in front of Chopper in the future. How could they be afraid that their gold wouldn't shine? For anyone with unrecognized talent, the value of recognition was far greater than money. From this, it could be seen that Wang Yu's recognition, which could bring money, was very meaningful to Chopper. Wang Yu smiled and said, What are you thanking me for? This is what you deserve. Even without me, it would still be the same. Later, go to Han's tavern and look for someone called Wuji. Tell him that I told you to look for him. He will take you to the promotion quest. I've already told him about it. Oh, oh. Chopper nodded his head in panic and said, Wuji? Could it be that Wuji? Wang Yu sweated a bit and said, Don't be afraid. They aren't as bad as the rumors say. They're just beasts. Chopper was speechless for a moment and said, I know, but can I see the weapon that you just forged? Chapter 750. As soon as Wang Yu displayed the glove's attributes, everyone's attention was drawn to it. Sai of the Martial Scholar, glove, epic, upgradable, attack, 400-400 mana, 400-400 plus 40 strength, plus 40 agility wind. Passive skill, attack speed plus 50% fire. Passive skill, attack damage plus 50% lightning. Passive skill, critical damage plus 30% electricity. Passive skill. Attacks are electrocuted. Lightning attribute increased by 30%. Earth. Passive skill. Attack priority plus 50% special skills. Fusion. Confuse with weapons of the same level to repair and level up. Weapon Master. Can change into other weapon forms according to the player's needs. Staff. Long staff. Oriental staff additional skill. Block. Block at least 60% of damage from the target. Universe Blade. Long blade, short blade, sheath. Additional skill. Quick switch. Long blade attack damage plus 30%. Short blade attack speed plus 30%. Sheath critical damage plus 30%. Can be stacked with the weapon's main attributes. Sword. Two-handed sword. One-handed sword. Additional skill. None dual wielding sword. Additional skill. None flying blade shield. Additional skill. None level requirement. 40 class requirement. Martial Scholar item description. A weapon left behind by Martial God. It contains great power. Epic skill. Fist of the Heavens. Active skill. Consumes 50% of the user's MP to deal a fatal blow to the target. Cooldown. 60 minutes. Equipment Forger. Chopper. 345. Iron Ox. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air when they saw the attributes of Wang Yu Glove. Although Wang Yu Glove's main attributes were maxed out, the 5 additional attributes were all passive skills. Compared to the variety of equipment in Rebirth, it was a little crude. However, the 5 passive attributes were so strong that no one dared to look down on them. A 50% increase in attack speed, a 50% increase in attack power, and a 30% increase in critical rate. Even an idiot would know how powerful these 3 attributes were without a doubt. As for the last 2 attributes, they were even stronger than the first 3. Electrocution had a paralyzing effect and could interrupt the casting of a skill. It was a very powerful skill effect, and the 30 lightning attribute buff was equivalent to a piece of equipment for mages. Even a mage like Ming Du did not have any equipment that added 30 lightning attribute buff. As for attack priority, it was definitely the most important attribute in the game. In PvE, a player's attack priority represented the success rate of controlling or grabbing skills. A player with a high attack priority could often save the day by interrupting a skill. From a PvP perspective, judgment was even more important. Unlike backstabbing assassins, Grandmasters of Combat were also a class that faced their opponents head-on. Naturally, the higher the attack judgment, the stronger the suppression. Wang Yu was so strong that even he had trouble dealing with Flowing Cloud, who had high judgment. One could only imagine how important attack judgment was in PvP. If any one of these 5 attributes were randomly drawn out and placed on any piece of equipment, that piece of equipment would become a sought-after artifact. Now that these 5 exquisite attributes had appeared on a single weapon at the same time, one could imagine the visual impact of it. Of course, for Wang Yu, these 5 attributes paled in comparison to the special effect of Weapon Master. As a martial artist, Wang Yu's love for weapons came from the bottom of his heart. Apart from the Swiss Army knife, the only other weapon that could bring out the effects of multiple weapons was probably in the game. Seeing the full set of attributes of Wang Yu, no one cared about anything else. One by one, they took out their cameras and took screenshots. A player's self-made epic weapon. This was first-hand information. Is this weapon for sale? After a long while, a player finally voiced out the question that was on everyone's mind. Who would want a good weapon? It didn't matter if they could afford it or not. After seeing such a powerful weapon, they had to ask symbolically to show their respect. Wang Yu smiled and shook his head. He equipped the martial scholar's sai. His meaning was clear. I haven't played enough with it yet, so why would I sell it? No one was surprised by Wang Yu's answer, and no one went up to pester him. Not to mention the fact that this exclusive weapon couldn't be used even if they bought it. Just seeing the name of the forger, no one would go up to ask for a rebuff. After putting away the weapon, Wang Yu left the blacksmith shop with Chopper, leaving behind a group of onlookers who were still reminiscing about the attributes of the equipment. After leaving the blacksmith shop, Wang Yu brought Chopper to the tavern. At this time, the people in the tavern stood up solemnly to welcome Wang Yu. What's wrong with you guys? Wang Yu had mingled with these people for a long time, but he had never seen them so serious. Uncle Nyo, when are you going to make an equipment for me? To place one's pride respectfully asked. When Wang Yu finished making the equipment, he immediately sent the equipment's attributes to the guild channel. When everyone saw Wang Yu's gloves, they suddenly felt that their equipment was trash. Wang Yu smiled and said, "Come find me when you've gathered tens of thousands of gold's worth of rare materials." When everyone heard this, they all became listless. Rare materials worth tens of thousands of gold's worth were nothing compared to a godly weapon. Seeing everyone's reaction, Wang Yu continued, "My smithing art is just so without rare materials. Come. Let me introduce you to a professional weapon blacksmith with real skills." After saying that, Wang Yu waved at Chopper. Chopper carefully walked over. Wang Yu pointed at Chopper and introduced, "Chopper 345. The reason why I was able to forge my weapon today is all because of him." Before Wang Yu could finish speaking, everyone threw Wang Yu aside and surrounded Chopper. "Master, please make equipment for us." Money isn't, Wang Yu. Chopper had never seen such a scene before. When he was surrounded by a group of legendary baddies, he was so anxious that tears almost flowed out of his eyes. Hold back. Chopper still hasn't completed his advanced blacksmith advancement quest. You guys have to help him complete it first, Wang Yu reminded. This is nothing. It's just a small quest. I'll help you complete it by myself. Chopper, help me get a magic staff first. My dark gold grade magic staff isn't easy to use. Mingdu looked at the magic staff in disdain and spat out a mouthful of saliva. To place one's pride, not to be outdone, said, "Chopper, we're about the same age. From today onwards, you'll be my older brother. As an older brother, you have to Uncle Chopper. I've always respected you. Chopper, if you do it for me, you'll be the next leader of Chuanjin." This was Mingjian Daoxue. Oof. Wuji coldly snorted. "Chopper, you're Chuanjin's boss now." Chapter 751. Let's go. Seeing that the people from the Quanjin sect had completely ignored her and focused on Chopper, Wang Yu walked up to reaching the peak and said, at first, Wang Yu was worried that these guys would bully Chopper, but now, it seemed like Wang Yu's worries were unfounded. These guys treated Chopper like their father, so why would they bully him? After saying goodbye to Chuanjin's group, Wang Yu and Peak left the tavern. As Cloud Mountain City belonged to the Dark faction, Yu Huicheng did not have a direct airship. He had to fly to Sinner City at the front line of the Land of Exile and walk there. After more than an hour, the airship finally landed in Sinner City. As there was no government or guards, people could do whatever they wanted here. Red name players were everywhere. Moreover, this was the front line of the battlefield. Players did not have any contribution points to the main city, so they relied on the army to earn a living. Thus, small groups and mercenary groups were everywhere. Fights and robberies were a common occurrence. If you saw someone you didn't like, you would stab them. If you saw someone with something, you would rob them. That was the code of conduct. When the good guys could no longer survive, the bad guys would get worse. Over time, Sinner City became notorious and became the most chaotic main city in Rebirth. It was also one of the main features of the game. Throughout history, this was the first game that could transform the players into such a state. Because of this, The game company had considered creating a faction war expansion pack to wipe out this main city. But in the end, the players objected, and the matter was left unsettled. As soon as they got off the airship and entered the city, Wang Yu were targeted. This was very normal. Wang Yu did not lose to him in terms of equipment. There is a huge difference between the high-end goods and the low-end goods in Rebirth. Even if they did not intentionally turn on the lighting effects, these experienced criminals in the City of Sin would be able to tell the difference at a glance. Peak was low-key, but he was even more afraid of death. He was armed to the teeth, afraid of being stabbed to death. Wang Yu was even more exaggerated. The novelty of his new equipment had not worn off yet, so he was unwilling to take it off. The purple glow on his hands was extremely ostentatious. Since the two of them dared to stroll around Sin City in such a high-profile manner, it would be strange if they weren't targeted. After a few steps, Wang Yu said to Greater Heights, "You should go stealthily. There are people following us." Am I being targeted? Are there many people? 3 or 4 of them, all assassins. Wang Yu said, "They should be the wandering bandits here. They're most likely here to rob." Wang Yu had been to Nifa's city before, and she knew that the culture here was only suitable for scum like Mingdu to live in. No matter who was following him, Greater Heights of Zenith's personality was not one that he would want to provoke. Hearing Wang Yu's words, Greater Heights of Zenith went into stealth without hesitation. Thinking that it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble, Wang Yu also turned off the light on his weapon. Very soon, Wang Yu and Yi Zichen were out of the city. The two of them passed through the battlefield and headed towards Cloud Mountain City. However, not only did the number of people on their way not decrease, there were even more of them. That's not right. Why are there more and more people? There should be around 20 of them now. At this moment, Wang Yu said with a frown, "This was Sin City. If they really wanted to rob someone, they would have done it already. Why were there more and more people? What if they were afraid of splitting the loot? It can't be Heavenly Fiend Alliance, right?" Greater Heights faced pale when he heard this and asked carefully. Heavenly Fiend Alliance was the guild that Greater Heights had offended. In the game, they were considered an old guild. It was said that they were even older than 3 Fiend Manor and had a deep foundation. Sin City was the only way for Greater Heights to return to Cloud Mountain City, so it was reasonable for them to place some people here to block his path. "It's the guild that's chasing you, right?" Wang Yu asked. "Yeah," Greater Heights said. "They haven't made a move yet. It looks like they're afraid that you're the local snake here. If we go this way, we'll be in Cloud Mountain City's territory. You have to be careful. As the saying goes, a strong dragon cannot suppress a local snake." Although Sin City was a pile of loose sand, everyone was a group of fierce people. Disregarding everything else, their PvP skills were definitely on a higher level than the players of other main cities. If they really provoked these bandits, even a large guild like Heavenly Fiend Alliance would suffer. Heavenly Fiend Alliance only wanted to stop Greater Heights. There is no need for them to provoke an undeserved disaster. "No problem. Even if we reach a secluded place, these few people won't be a match for me," Wang Yu said confidently as he rubbed his fists together. Hearing Wang Yu's words, Greater Heights blushed with shame. Against Wang Yu, Greater Heights felt the same as Wuji. From time to time, he would feel a sense of helplessness. Indeed, as Greater Heights expected, the moment the two of them passed through the battlefield and left Sin City's territory, the players following them immediately bared their fangs. More than 10 melee players quickly surrounded Wang Yu and Greater Heights. Wang Yu couldn't help but stop. "Brother, don't be afraid. We're not looking for you. We're looking for Greater Heights. You should know where he is." At this moment, a person who looked like a knight stood up and spoke to Wang Yu. Greater Heights stood beside Wang Yu. However, he was in stealth, so no one could see him. "Oh, who are you?" Wang Yu asked the knight. "I'm Tuoba Yuan. You can call me Young Master Yuan," the knight said narcissistically. When Wang Yu heard this, he laughed. "Mop? Young Master Yuan? Why does this name sound like a joke?" Tuoba Yuan's expression darkened as he said, "No one is joking with you. We're all neighbors. I don't want to fight with you people from Sin City. Hurry up and tell me where Greater Heights is." "It's here." Wang Yu casually pulled reached the peak out. Greater Heights, who was pulled out by Wang Yu, had an expression of disbelief. He looked at Wang Yu in shock and said, "Damn, what are you doing?" Wang Yu said, "I think he's quite sincere. I think we should have a good talk and get them to give up. Otherwise, even if we return to the city, we might not be able to turn in the quest." Wang Yu's worry was not unreasonable. The Heavenly Fiend Alliance was a large guild, after all. There were at least a few thousand guild members, if not tens of thousands. Now that they knew that Greater Heights had returned, they surrounded the NPCs who were turning in the quest. No matter how strong Wang Yu was, he might not be able to escape unscathed under the siege of a few thousand people. Furthermore, he was carrying a burden. Thus, it was best to sit down and talk. Wang Yu was willing to be a mediator. "What do you think?" Wang Yu turned to ask Tuoba Yuan. "Talk your sister." Tuoba Yuan was already furious when he saw Wang Yu putting on an act. He was already enraged when he saw Wang Yu putting on an act, so he blurted out vulgarities. At that moment, Wang Yu suddenly swung his right hand and punched the face of Shield Warrior who was rushing over to attack him. The Shield Warrior immediately turned into white light, and Tuoba Yuan's vulgarities came to an abrupt end. "How is your sister?" Tuoba Yuan quickly asked. Chapter 752. It's not like I can't make the decision. Tuoba Yuan didn't deny or agree. Instead, he answered in a very awkward manner. One had to know that the Hero Class Advancement quest was not a small matter in the game. Tuoba Yuan was only a small team leader, so he naturally couldn't make the decision. He didn't dare to deny it. Wang Yu killed a Shield Warrior with a single punch. In order to capture this assassin, the people from the Heavenly Demon Alliance had sent melee professions that were not countered by assassins. At such a close distance, no one dared to make a move against such a ferocious person. Wang Yu said, "I'm not asking you to make the decision. Bring me to see your boss. I'll talk to him." "See our boss." When the people from the Heavenly Demon Alliance heard Wang Yu's words, their bodies trembled and they started to get restless. Was he going to fight alone? This brat obviously wasn't looking down on the two of them. He was looking down on the entire Heavenly Demon Alliance. Damn it, he's too arrogant. Just as Tuoba Yuan didn't know how to answer, Wang Yu grabbed another assassin who had sneak attacked him from behind. He threw him on the ground and stepped on him. Then he said to Tuoba Yuan, "What's the matter? Is there a problem?" Seeing the assassin on the ground, the people from the Heavenly Demon Alliance instantly became listless, killing a tank with a single punch and catching an assassin with his bare hands. Where did this brat come from? It was said that there were many experts in the City of Sin. Could they all be this powerful? No. I'll inform our boss now," Tuoba Yuan said in a panic. He opened his friend's list and found the boss of the Heavenly Demon Alliance, soldiers in the battlefield. He sent a message, "Boss, are you there?" Looking at the people from the Heavenly Demon Alliance who didn't even dare to breathe, the Greater Peaks was dumbfounded. He was also deeply shocked by Wang Yu's strength. In the past, in the eyes of those who had reached the pinnacle, only those who used their brains were the strongest. However, now that they had reached the pinnacle, they understood that being strong in terms of intelligence could at most be used to deal with the opponent. Being strong in terms of strength could directly make the opponent not dare to be their enemy. Subduing the enemy without fighting. This was the highest realm, right? Heavenly Fiend Alliance's boss, soldiers in the battlefield, was a legendary figure in the game circle. It was said that this guy came from a military background. He was extraordinarily strong, meticulous, righteous, and domineering. He attracted countless fans with his domineering and masculine image. He had been dragged in as a spokesperson by many online game companies. The core members of the Heavenly Fiend Alliance were all retired soldiers. Every one of them had extraordinary abilities. When they first debuted, they had won 3 consecutive world championships in the professional league. The Battlefield Commander was also a professional player who had won the Most Valuable Esports Athlete award. It was rumored that when the Heavenly Demon Alliance was at its strongest, even the Three Fiends Manor, which was known as the #1 guild, had to avoid them. However, at that time, the esports scene was still dominated by keyboard and mouse games. The players were mainly youngsters, soldiers in the battlefield, and the others were at the tail end of their youth. The lack of a new generation of players caused the Heavenly Fiend Alliance to be short of talent. After a few years of glory, the Heavenly Fiend Alliance went downhill. Now, they could not even pass the preliminaries of the professional league. Although they were an old guild, they did not have the prestige that an old guild should have. The people who were still in the Heavenly Fiend Alliance were either a bunch of old people or a group of die-hard fans. How should I put it? The cohesiveness was quite strong. It could be considered a guild culture. However, the appearance of rebirth gave the Heavenly Fiend Alliance a chance of survival. Although this group of old people's skills had deteriorated, their bodies were still very strong. Furthermore, they came from a military background. Once the game was released, they did very well and seemed to have the intention of making a comeback. At that moment, Soldiers in the Battlefield was leading a team to clear a dungeon. When he saw Tooba Yuan's message, he frowned and replied, "Mop, how many times have I told you? If you have anything in the future, just say it. Don't ask me if I'm here. Did you get the token?" Tooba Yuan was a little afraid of Soldiers in the Battlefield's imposing manner. When he heard Soldiers in the Battlefield's question, he could not help but start stammering. "Answer me. Do you have it or not?" Soldiers in the Battlefield had been retired for so many years, but his military demeanor was still so strong. "No," Tooba Yuan said. "Then why are you looking for me?" Tooba Yuan replied, "There's someone who wants to stand up for greater heights. Just kill him. Do you still need me to teach you?" Soldiers in the Battlefield was a little impatient. Greater Heights had formed quite a grudge with the Heavenly Fiend Alliance. Although the Heavenly Fiend Alliance had declined, it was not something that anyone could bully. "It's an expert, the very strong kind. We couldn't stop him, so he said he wanted to talk to you. He's already at the Flying Fortress." "Oh, wait for me at the fortress." Soldiers in the Flying Fortress gave a simple reply and did not say anything else. "Our boss asked you guys to wait for him at the fortress in front," Tooba Yuan said to Wang Yu as he pointed at the checkpoint that separated the two camps not far away. "Don't go. That's the Heavenly Fiend Alliance's base. They don't have good intentions." Before Wang Yu could reply, Greater Heights spoke first. Tooba Yuan laughed coldly and said, "Tisk, despicable peaks. Who here doesn't know the character of the Heavenly Fiend Alliance? Do you think they're all despicable people like you?" Hearing this, Greater Heights' face turned red and did not retort. It seemed like the Heavenly Fiend Alliance had a pretty good reputation. Wang Yu smiled and said, "Go stealthily and wait in the city. I'll go with them. Don't worry. Even if we can't come to an agreement, I have a way to get you to do the mission." Greater Heights said, "Then why don't we just use the second method? Why waste our time talking to these people?" Wang Yu scratched his head and said, "It will be troublesome for me to deal with so many of them by myself." When Greater Heights heard Wang Yu's second method, he was momentarily speechless. Damn it, this guy's final trump card was to go head-on. This method was indeed unacceptable. "All right, I'll make a move first. Be careful." Saying this, Greater Heights stealthily walked toward the Cloud Mountain City. With Wang Yu around, the people from the Heavenly Fiend Alliance did not dare to do anything. They were helpless when they saw Greater Heights disappear again. However, they were not worried. There were people guarding the place where they handed in the mission. With Greater Heights' abilities, there was no way he could break through the defense line. After Greater Heights left, Wang Yu followed Tooba Yuan to the Heavenly Fiend Alliance's base, the Flying Fortress. The Flying Fortress had the same geographical significance as the Iron Rock Castle in the game's background. It was a checkpoint between the two camps, except that the Iron Rock Castle belonged to the Light faction, while the Flying Fortress belonged to the Dark faction. Furthermore, the Flying Fortress did not have an impenetrable defense like the Iron Rock Castle. The Flying Fortress was an extremely ordinary checkpoint, standing at the edge of the battlefield. Wang Yu looked down and saw that the frontline army camp of the Dark faction was not far away. Further ahead was the battlefield. The murderous aura here was much stronger than that of the Iron Rock Castle. Furthermore, the entire fortress was behind the army camp, making it seem like a reserve. "You guys really know how to find a place to set up your base," Wang Yu could not help but say when he saw the base of the Heavenly Fiend Alliance. Chapter 753. Flying General Long Chung had not finished his dungeon run yet. Wang Yu sat alone in the Heaven Fiend Union's meeting hall, quietly waiting. Not long after, the Heaven Fiend Union's teleportation formation flashed, and a group of people appeared in the courtyard of the Heaven Fiend Union's encampment. At the very front was a Death Knight. He looked to be around 34 or 35 years old, and had a pair of narrow eyes under his sharp eyebrows. His resolute face was filled with killing intent. This person wore black clothes and black armor, and held a long spear in his hand. The spear was covered in red flames, and one look was enough to tell that it was a top-quality fire weapon. He was the leader of the Heaven Fiend Union, Flying General Long Chung. Behind Flying General Long Chung, there was a group of middle-aged men who were about the same age as him. These fellows had the same temperament as Flying General Long Chung, the same unswerving determination, the same murderous aura. Just by standing there, their imposing manner was even heavier than hundreds of people. That person is in the meeting hall. Seeing Flying General Long Chung return, Tuoba Yuan didn't wait for him to ask questions and hurriedly ran over, pointing to the meeting hall. Flying General Long Chung nodded his head and led his group into the meeting hall, where he saw a calm expression on Wang Yu's face. Oh, seeing Wang Yu, Flying General Long Chung was slightly startled. Not only did this person in front of him dare to stand up for the great heights, but this was the first time Flying General Long Chung had seen someone with such a calm expression when facing a group of people filled with killing intent. It was obvious that this person was either a fool or a madman. Seeing the aura of Flying General Long Chung and the others, Wang Yu was actually a little shocked. After all, no matter how strong Wang Yu was, he was still a law-abiding citizen. He had never seen someone with such a strong, killing intent. I am the Heaven Fiend Union's leader, Flying General Long Chung. Are you the one who wants to stand up for the great heights? Flying General Long Chung walked in front of Wang Yu and asked in a condescending manner. Wang Yu stood up and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, I'm not standing up. I just want to be a mediator. Humph. General Long Chung coldly snorted and said, Is there a difference? Wang Yu said, Mediate, it's you guys doing me a favor and not using weapons. If you stand up for me, it'll be more troublesome. We don't have any grudges and we can talk things out. I don't want to fight either. It's not easy for everyone to level up. The meaning behind Wang Yu's words was clear. The Heavenly Demon Union had to give him some face. Otherwise, he would start a massacre. Although what Wang Yu had said was the truth, it was a little too arrogant to say such words in the Heavenly Demon Union's territory. Hearing Wang Yu's words, the middle-aged uncles behind General Long Chung Fei immediately became unhappy. F***CK. You young people don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Little bastard, I'll kill you. These uncles looked like they had a fiery temper. At that moment, the veins on their foreheads were bulging, and their fists were clenched so tightly that cracking sounds could be heard. If they weren't very disciplined, they would have already pounced forward. General Long Chung Fei waved his hand at the people behind him, then stared at Wang Yu and said, We don't even know you. Why should we give you face? My name is Iron Ox. Wang Yu introduced himself. Iron Ox? General Long Chung Fei rubbed his chin and said, I think I've heard this name before. You're not from our dark camp, right? Yes. Wang Yu nodded and said, I'm from Xuanjin. Xuanjin. Hearing the words Xuanjin, General Long Chung Fei and the others' expressions eased up a lot. He then said, So you're from Xuanjin. I also know about the matter between Xuanjin and the Three Fiends village, but there's no Iron Ox in Xuanjin, right? I'm a newbie. Wang Yu said, I don't **king care if you're a newbie or not. General Long Chung Fei said coldly, Why didn't you just stay on your side and come here to meddle in our business? On account of your past relationship with Boss Wuji, I'll let you live. Hurry up and **ck off. Wang Yu shook his head and said, I've been entrusted with a task, so I'll be loyal. Since I'm here, there must be a result. You don't want your subordinates to live in fear, right? You think I'm scared? General Long Chung Fei shouted angrily when he heard Wang Yu's words. The Heavenly Demon Union had been the gaming circle for many years, But General Long Chengfei had never seen anyone who dared to speak to him like this. However, Wang Yu's words also gave General Long Chengfei a reminder. The guy in front of him was from Chuanjin. General Long Chengfei knew very well what kind of people from Chuanjin were. This group of scourges was famous for being dogskin plasters. They would use any method they could think of. As long as a person could think of a sinister method, there was nothing they wouldn't dare to use. What was even more troublesome was that these guys played the game for fun. Everyone was a professional gamer, so how could they have the time to play around with them? No. Wang Yu shook his head and said, I just don't want to be too troublesome. Let's make an exception and give each other some face. Who knows when you'll be begging me in the future? Hee. General Long Chengfei laughed angrily. You're a bit interesting. Do you know that to be a peacemaker, you have to have the ability to do so? I know that. Just tell me what topic you want. Wang Yu nodded and said, just like the gaming circle, in the real Kung Fu circle, there were many sects and disputes. Those who practiced Kung Fu were different from ordinary people. Often, a sect would marry several other sects, and a fight would result in a bunch of relatives. Those who practiced Kung Fu were also ruthless. There were very few people who practiced Kung Fu, and sooner or later, there would be no one left. Therefore, there was a profession called dispute mediator. This person represented the order of the Kung Fu circle. Since he dared to represent the order, he must be strong enough. You're so weak that you can't reason with a group of people who play with fists and feet. In today's Kung Fu circle, there are 4 big Kung Fu families. The other 3 families each had clear martial arts inheritances, such as Baji and Tai Chi. Only the Wang family's inheritance was vague. The reason why the Wang family was able to stand firmly among the 4 big families was because the Wang family represented the order. From the day the order was established, the head of the Wang family was the so-called mediator, and Wang Yu was the next generation of the order. Although Kung Fu was declining and there weren't many fights, the order was just a symbolic decoration. But as the order, how could Wang Yu not understand the meaning behind it? AI. General Long Chengfei saw that Wang Yu was serious and sighed. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, Since you think you're good, then how about this? Show us a few moves. How do I show you? Wang Yu asked. General Long Chengfei scratched his chin and said, I won't bully you because you're a newcomer. Our side will send someone to fight 3 rounds with you. If you win, then we'll forget about this. Our Tianxia Union won't look for trouble with you anymore. But if you lose, you have to get out of here. What do you think? That a good idea? Wang Yu nodded his head. According to the Wang family's ancient records, it was very difficult to be a dispute mediator. Taking turns to fight against a group was the lowest level. General Long Chengfei's task was very simple. Since there's no problem, third brother, go and fight with him. General Long Chengfei said to a warrior behind him. Chapter 754. As soon as Flying General Long finished speaking, a player stepped out from behind him. This player was around 35 or 36 years old, had a crew cut, and looked very capable. The muscles on his body wriggled slightly with each step he took. With one look, it was obvious that he was the real deal and not just a game effect. Not to mention anything else, just this body alone would be enough to kill all the little fresh meats. Come. The middle-aged man was a straightforward person. Without any unnecessary words, he immediately sent a request to Wang Yu for a spar. Wang Yu stood up and politely cupped his fists. Iron Ox, I'm sorry. Drunk in the sandpit, the middle-aged man said as he took out his weapon. Seeing the middle-aged man's weapon, Wang Yu was shocked. It was a one-handed short sword that was 2 feet long. Rather than calling it a sword, it was more accurate to call it a stab. The entire blade was like a triangular file, and there were grooves on all 3 sides. If he stabbed it, he would definitely bleed. Just as Wang Yu was in a daze, drunk in the sandpit's figure flashed, and he disappeared into thin air. Only then did Wang Yu realize that this guy wasn't a warrior, but an assassin drunk in the sandpit who was in stealth, saw that Wang Yu was still in a daze. Without the slightest hesitation or mercy, he activated swift movement and circled around to Wang Yu's side. With a flip of his stab, he stabbed the right side of Wang Yu's neck. As expected of a former soldier, his technique was much more professional than the average person. If it was a normal person, this backstab would definitely be aimed at the waist. After all, there was a backstab bonus. On the other hand, lying in the sand drunken's target was Wang Yu's carotid artery. This was a vital point of a person, and it would be impossible to reverse the situation with a single stab. Although in the game, all attributes were materialized, and lying in the sand drunken might not be able to kill her instantly, but with the weapon in his hand that was specially used to bleed, the damage output would definitely be terrifying. Oomph. You dare to stand up for others with this kind of skill? Drunken Sandpit could not help but sneer when he saw that Wang Yu had not noticed him even after he made a move. However, at that moment, Wang Yu took a slight step back, and Drunken Sandfield's weapon brushed past Wang Yu's chest. Seeing that lying in the sand drunken missed, Wang Yu pressed his hand on the back of lying in the sand drunken's head. Lying drunk in the sandpit, who had missed his target, lost his balance. With Wang Yu's push, his weapon plunged straight into the ground. However, lying drunk in the sandpit was quite skilled. In the instant that he fell to the ground, he quickly turned his body and used his left hand to support himself on the ground. Both of his legs left the ground and kicked towards Wang Yu's throat. Wang Yu smiled as he reached out with his left hand to grab lying drunk in the sandbox's right ankle. He extended his right hand halfway before stopping and saying to lying drunk in the sandbox, "You lose. I'm not dead yet." Lying drunk in the sandbox kicked with his right foot, trying to break free. However, he found that Wang Yu's hand was like an iron clamp, and he could not break free at all. It could not be helped. No matter how low a fighter's judgment was, it was still higher than an assassin's. Moreover, lying drunk in the sandbox's opponent was Wang Yu. At that moment, Flying General Long and the others tried to persuade him. "That's enough, third brother. You really lost. I can still fight." Lying drunk in the sandbox was also an old man, and he was naturally not happy to lose to a young man. "Look behind you." Flying General Long sighed as he pointed at Wang Yu's right fist. Lying drunk in the sandbox, who was facing downwards, used a very difficult turn to look in the direction that Flying General Long was pointing at. He saw that Wang Yu's fist had stopped not far above his crotch. Seeing this scene, lying drunk in the sandbox's face turned red. If it was not for Wang Yu's mercy, he lost. Lying drunk in the sandbox was also a man who knew when to give up and when to give up, so he casually pressed the surrender button. Wang Yu let go of his hand and put it down. He gave a fist salute and said, "You let me win." Lying drunk in the sandbox stood up unhappily and said, "Oomph, cut the crap. A loss is a loss. You have the ability to win or not. Who are you trying to embarrass?" Admitting defeat was easy, but his heart was not necessarily happy. Lying drunk in the sandbox was really a straightforward person. Wang Yu smiled awkwardly and asked Flying General Long, "Who's next?" "Wait a moment." Flying General Long waved his hand and said to Wang Yu, "This kid is a bit fierce. Should we call Old Tong over?" Flying General Long turned his head and asked a group of brothers. To be honest, Flying General Long and his group were famous professional players, and in this new mode, they were like fish in water. They were invincible, so they did not take Wang Yu seriously at first. So they let lying drunk in the sandbox, who could instantly kill people, deal with it quickly. Who knew that lying drunk in the sandbox could not even withstand a single round of sneak attacks and was killed. This was so F***king embarrassing. Fortunately, this kid came to keep the peace and not to cause trouble, or else lying drunk in the sandbox would have shadow in his heart. Flying General Long and the others were comrades and friends for many years. They knew each other's favorite underwear. Naturally, they knew lying drunk in the sandbox's strength. If even he could not withstand a single attack, the others would probably not be able to. At this time, a slightly younger face said, "Call Old Tong? There's no need. This kid in front of us is with greater heights, so he must have an anti-stealth item on him. That's why third brother is at a disadvantage. Why don't you let me try? If I can't handle it, I'll call Old Tong." "I think Little Five is right." Lying drunk in the sandbox nodded and said, "Otherwise, how could he dodge my attack? He must have used an item." Greater Heights was famous for being rich in resources, and Little Five's point of view was quite reasonable. Flying General Long rubbed his chin and thought for a moment, then said, "Okay, Little Five, don't embarrass yourself." "Got it." Little Five nodded and walked in front of Wang Yu. He sent out a challenge and said, "I'll fight you this round. Iron Ox, please advise me." Wang Yu cupped his fists in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. "Luring Frost Wu." Little Five also replied to Wang Yu, then unsheathed his sword. Wang Yu was here as a mediator, so he naturally could not make the first move. He used his left hand to protect his abdomen and his right hand to take a defensive stance. But in the next moment, Luring Frost Wu did not act like a normal warrior, using charge or collapsing mountain to attack. Instead, he turned around and ran. Wang Yu was confused. Just now, it was an assassin with a sword. Could this guy be an archer with a sword? Just as Wang Yu was wondering, Luring Frost Wu was already 5 meters away from Wang Yu. Then, he pointed his left hand and pointed his long sword. A sword flew out from his back, stabbing towards Wang Yu. Wang Yu saw this and waved his right hand, knocking the flying sword to the ground. But at this moment, Luring Frost waved his hand, and another 3 swords flew out. The 3 swords formed a fan as they flew towards Wang Yu. Wang Yu kicked the sword in front of him away. At the same time, he extended both his hands and used light wrong shadow, knocking the other 2 swords to the ground. Then, he followed up with a collapsing fist and rushed towards Luring Frost Wu. When Luring Frost Wu saw Wang Yu rush over, he waved his hand and another sword flew out. Luring Frost Wu followed the sword and moved a few meters, dodging Wang Yu's fist. After landing, Luring Frost Wu smirked. He twisted his wrist and stabbed his sword into the ground. Chapter 755. Following Frostbite's roar, the 5 swords that he had just tossed out flew back to him. Previously, 4 of Frostbite's 5 swords had flown towards Wang Yu. Feeling the killing intent behind him, Wang Yu hurriedly bent down. The 4 swords form a line, brushing past Wang Yu's back and merging with Frostbite's sword. Wu Luring Frost stepped forward, thrusting the sword in his hand towards Wang Yu's head. Wang Yu lowered his head. Seeing Frostbite step forward, he knew what he was thinking. As such, he pressed his body down again. His feet pushed off the ground, and he pounced towards Frostbite's feet. He then spun upside down and kicked towards Frostbite's chin. Wang Yu's sudden lunge gave Luring Frost a fright. Seeing Wang Yu's 2 legs coming at him, Luring Frost hurriedly pulled with both hands. His 6 swords crisscrossed into a sword shield, blocking Wang Yu's 2 legs. At the same time, Luring Frost was sent flying. Wang Yu didn't want to hurt anyone. If she had used Thunderous Stomp, even a tank like Luring would have been beaten half to death by that kick. Holy *T, that works too? Seeing Wang Yu, who had been suppressed by Frostbite all this time, suddenly counterattacked, the spectators couldn't help but be shocked. Frostbite wasn't an ordinary warrior. He had one of the strongest hidden warrior classes, Blade Soul. Not only could a Blade Soul practice warrior skills, but it also had its own set of skills. In battle, it could summon 5 swords to attack. Its damage output was much higher than an ordinary warrior's. This class could attack and defend at close range. During the closed beta, it was known as a hidden warrior class that was second only to heroes. It was like a bug. When these 5 swords were thrown out, it could use 10,000 returning swords to summon them back and attack the target a second time, creating a surprise effect. However, under the suppression of the 10,000 swords returned to origin, Wang Yu not only dodged the attack, but also launched a counterattack. His reaction speed was too terrifying. Even if Long Chengfei and the others were at their peak, they would not dare to say that they had this kind of reaction speed. Good lad, you're really something. Of course, Wu Luring Frost didn't know that Wang Yu was going easy on him. He quick recovered from the air and landed on the ground. Then, without any hesitation, he raised his sword with both hands and charged at Wang Yu. Seeing Luring Frost charge at him, Wang Yu jumped back, jumping out of Luring Frost's charge range. Luring Frost canceled the skill and leapt into the air, using Collapsing Mountain to smash towards Wang Yu. Wang Yu extended his hand. Just as he was about to drag Frostbite down from the air, Frostbite canceled Collapsing Mountain and activated Whirlwind Slash. What a powerful uncle! Wang Yu exclaimed. He knelt down and used Tiger Strike to grab Luring Frost's leg. Luring Frost's spinning skill was forcefully interrupted. He pointed his long sword at Wang Yu, and 5 swords flew out from Luring Frost's direction, heading straight for Wang Yu's back. Luring Frost's 5 swords sealed off all of Wang Yu's possible escape routes. Just as Wang Yu was about to die, Wang Yu let go of Luring Frost's ankle and changed his weapon into a longsword. He didn't dodge, but instead attacked. Wang Yu's attack was extremely fast. The longsword in his hand arrived first. Dang, 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 dang. With a series of sounds, the 5 swords were knocked away by Wang Yu, and Luring Frost fell to the ground at the same time. After landing, Luring Frost was about to use 10,000 Return to Origin again, but Wang Yu pointed his long sword at Luring Frost's wrist, interrupting the skill. Afterwards, Wang Yu took a step forward, his other hand reaching under Luring Frost's hand and grabbing the hilt of Luring Frost's sword. Because Luring Frost's wrist had been touched by Wang Yu, his hand reflexively let go. Wang Yu spun his left hand and snatched Luring Frost's sword. Phantom Sword, Dark Gold, can level up, attack, 220-320 mana, 150-250 plus 37 agility plus 39 strength skills. If you want to return it, I won't count the words. Class requirement, Blade Soul level requirement, 40 item description, Blade Soul's exclusive sword. You've lost. Wang Yu raised Phantom Sword and placed it against Luring Frost's neck. Luring Frost froze for a moment. Then, his expression darkened. I've lost. Thank you for letting me win. Wang Yu raised Phantom Sword with both hands and respectfully handed it over to Luring Frost. Seeing the equipment that Wang Yu handed over, it wasn't just Luring Frost, but even Flying General Dragon was dumbfounded. You're willing to return this equipment to me? Luring Frost asked in disbelief. In the game, PvP was all about skill. If you lost your equipment, you could only blame yourself for being inferior. There was no reason to ask for it back. In reality, with Wang Yu's skill, Luring Frost was completely convinced of his loss. The reason why his expression was so dark was because of this Phantom Sword. Phantom Sword was Luring Frost's exclusive weapon. It was given to him when he changed classes. Who knew how much effort he had put in to upgrade it to Dark Gold grade? Even though exclusive weapons couldn't sell for a good price because of market demand, for Luring Frost, it was even more important than a divine weapon. He never expected Wang Yu to return it just like that. Wang Yu smiled. Of course I have to return your weapon. It's not like I can use it. Luring Frost was speechless for a moment. He excitedly took the sword and then solemnly said, Thank you. I owe you one. Wang Yu smiled and didn't say anything. It seems like this kid is quite meticulous. How about we just forget about Reach the Pinnacle? Flying General Dragon saw that Wang Yu was so happy to return the sword to Luring Frost, so he turned around to discuss with the others. Their Skyfiend alliance didn't want to owe anyone favors. I think that's fine. Drunken Sandpit and the others nodded in agreement. Luring Frost said this favor should be returned by me. Flying General Dragon said coldly, Little Five, you're not giving us face by saying that. Do you think we're going to split yours and mine? But before Little Five could finish, he heard Wang Yu say excitedly, Uncle Luring Frost is so strong. The next uncle must be even stronger. Which one is it? Hearing Wang Yu's words, everyone was speechless. This kid was getting more and more excited as they fought. He's very strong. I'm afraid you can't beat him, Flying General Dragon said. Really? Wang Yu said with a face full of desire. Let me see him. I haven't had an opponent for many years. Wasn't that right? With Wang Yu's martial arts. Even in the entire martial arts circle, including Old Wang, no one dared to say they could beat Wang Yu, let alone the younger generation. Old Wang and Wang Yu hadn't fought before. After all, it wasn't honorable to win, but it was embarrassing to lose. Not having an opponent was definitely not a boast. F***CK. Chapter 756. I'm coming. Why are you howling? How many times have I told you to control your temper? At this time, a vigorous voice came from outside the meeting hall. Then a tall and sturdy guy with a big belly steadily trotted in. It seemed that this guy was the legendary Old Tong. Old Tong was about 40 or 50 years old. His stature was very big. He was only a few centimeters shorter than Wang Yu. His protruding beer belly was particularly eye-catching. Nowadays, almost everyone who played the game was a nerd. There were many guys with this kind of figure. However, most of them were looking for a partner in the game. So, they would deliberately beautify themselves. Old Tong, who didn't hide his figure at all, was somewhat rare. Although Old Tong's appearance was comical, Wang Yu didn't have the slightest intention of looking down on him. He was even a little surprised. Wang Yu had practiced martial arts for many years. His eyes were very sharp. Ordinary martial artists might not be able to see that Old Tong was extraordinary. However, it was difficult for Old Tong to escape Wang Yu's discerning eyes. Although Old Tong's voice wasn't loud, it was full of vigor. His appearance was like a ladle. His gait was as steady as a mountain, especially his belly, which was protruding like a streamline. It looked somewhat well-proportioned and not cumbersome at all. Without dozens of years of internal martial arts, it was absolutely impossible to train such a figure. "What's wrong? Why are you looking for me?" After Old Tong entered the room, he first looked at Wang Yu with a slightly surprised look. Then, he asked Flying General Longsheng. Flying General Longsheng pointed at Wang Yu and said, "Old Tong, this kid said that he is invincible in the world. You go and teach him a lesson." He, Old Tong smiled at Flying General Longsheng and the others and said, "Aren't you a few kids very arrogant? How did you get beaten up?" Flying General Longsheng's face turned red and said, "This kid is very powerful. I guess only you can deal with him." "Hey," Old Tong chuckled and said, "If that's the case, then I'll help you again." "Thank you, Elder Tong." Flying General Longsheng bowed to Old Tong and then said to Wang Yu, "This is our Old Tong, a truly invincible expert. I originally wanted to forget about this matter, but since you are so arrogant, I'll let you know that there is always someone stronger than you. But you don't need to worry. Even if you lose, we won't make things difficult for you." Wang Yu nodded and said, "Thank you, uncles." After that, Wang Yu walked to Old Tong and asked, "Do you need to close the door?" Martial artists had always been particular about accepting disciples and sparring behind closed doors. Old Tong waved his hand indifferently and said, "There's no need. We were eliminated by society because we closed our doors." Although Old Tong's answer didn't match, it was obvious that this guy also saw that Wang Yu and himself were the same kind of person. "Iron Ox, please advise me." Wang Yu cupped his fists at Old Tong. "All rivers run into the sea." Old Tong cupped his fists and said his name. When the two were ready to fight, Old Tong suddenly covered his right hand and said to himself, "Hey, what is this thing?" Seeing Old Tong's appearance, Wang Yu's face was full of question marks. "Do you know what this thing is?" Old Tong raised his hand and asked Wang Yu. "I can't see it clearly." Old Tong seemed to be holding something in his hand, but Wang Yu could only vaguely see it. "Come and see." Old Tong called out to Wang Yu. Wang Yu curiously walked over, stretched his head and asked, "What is it? Let me see." It's a fist." Old Tong smiled and at the same time punched Wang Yu's chest. F***CK. Wang Yu turned pale with fright. She quickly covered her chest with her hands and jumped back. Pong! Old Tong's fist hit Wang Yu's palm. Wang Yu jumped back to avoid the attack, but he was not killed. Instead, he was punched far away. Originally, it was impossible for Wang Yu to be fooled by such a simple trick. However, Wang Yu never thought that Old Tong, an old martial artist, would play such a shameless trick. After punching Wang Yu, Old Tong didn't stop. He stepped on the ground and caught up with Wang Yu in 3 steps. His right palm pressed down on Wang Yu's arm, and he raised his left palm to support Wang Yu's face. Push elbow dribble. Seeing Old Tong's move, Wang Yu was slightly surprised and hurriedly dodged. At this time, Old Tong's feet stepped to the right and turned to the back of Wang Yu. He turned around and slapped Wang Yu's back. Wang Yu hurriedly turned around and closed his palms to meet Old Tong's palm. Old Tong's palm force was very strong, and Wang Yu's block was too hasty, so he was pushed away again. Old Tong's feet swayed as he continued to chase after Wang Yu. Upon seeing this, Wang Yu rolled backward to avoid Old Tong and stood up. Ba Guozhang. Old Tong, you are Ba Guozhang's Tong Yinshan. Wang Yu stood up and shouted in surprise. Old Tong stood with his hands behind his back and said, "That's me. I didn't expect you to break free from my suppression so quickly. It's rare to have such attainments at such a young age." It really is him. When Wang Yu heard that the person in front of him was Tong Yinshan, his relaxed feeling was swept away. No matter how many possibilities Wang Yu thought about, he never thought that he would meet such an expert in the game. Could it be that Yinshan City was named after this guy? Ba Guozhang, Xing Yi, and Tai Chi were the three major internal martial arts. However, compared to the latter two, Ba Guozhang was much more difficult to learn. This was because it had high requirements for the practitioner's movement and palm techniques. It was also better than Tai Chi and Xing. All in all, it was easy to learn but hard to master. At this time, Wang Yu finally understood what Tong Yinshan meant when he said, "Close the door." Many years ago, at the beginning of the decline of Kung Fu, the country used to publish some martial arts teaching materials. However, due to the sectarian bias of martial arts practitioners, there were only fist techniques and no movement techniques in the teaching materials. Ba Guozhang mainly focused on movement techniques, so it ended up in a miserable state. The three great internal martial arts were originally inseparable. In the end, Tai Chi and Xing Yi all had their own inheritances, while Ba Guozhang almost disappeared. Even a martial arts genius like Wang Yu had only learned a half-baked swimming dragon palm from Ba Guozhang. As a disciple of the Ba Gua sect, one could imagine Tong Yinshan's resentment. However, when Ba Guozhang became a lost art, Tong Yinshan stood out and defeated all the sects with his bare hands. Even the four aristocratic families were defeated by him. He could be said to be the early version of Wang Yu. In the end, after Tong Yinshan challenged the Wang family, he stopped his crazy behavior. Wang Yu didn't know who won or lost. However, from then on, Tong Yinshan became good friends with the head of the Wang family, Old Wang. When Wang Yu was young, Old Wang often talked about this fierce man in front of Wang Yu. As a result, Wang Yu was influenced by what he saw and heard. When he was 18, he also went out to play and earned the title of being invincible. Chapter 757. Ever since I was young, I've heard that Senior is an invincible hero. Now that I've seen you today, you truly live up to your reputation. Wang Yu replied sincerely. Even though Tong Yinshan had made the first move, Wang Yu, who had been through hundreds of battles, had never been suppressed like this by someone in terms of fist techniques. This old fellow's movements were like the wind, and his movements were like thunder. His fist techniques were exquisite and seemed to have reached the peak of perfection. Haha, what do you mean by reputation? Brat, it's rare for this old man to meet an expert. Come and spar with me. Those who practice martial arts, especially those who had reached this realm, always had a strong desire to fight. Tong Yinshan seemed to have a hard time encountering an opponent. Suddenly encountering an expert like Wang Yu, he naturally couldn't hold back his hunger and excitement. Wang Yu didn't back down either. She spread her arms and gestured for Tong Yinshan to come up with a hook gesture. Tai Chi? Interesting. Ha! Tong Yinshan stepped forward and thrust his right palm forward. Wang Yu didn't dodge. He extended his left hand to support Tong Yinshan's palm and grabbed Tong Yinshan's elbow with his right hand. Tong Yinshan's arm was grabbed by Wang Yu. Tong Yinshan didn't panic. His left hand grabbed Wang Yu's raised elbow and lifted it up. He lifted Wang Yu's arm and neutralized Wang Yu's move. Wang Yu's body swayed and his arm was freed. His shoulder slammed into Tong Yinshan's chest. Tong Yinshan couldn't help but retreat. Tong Yinshan, who was retreating, made his move again and grabbed Wang Yu's arm. Wang Yu was pulled forward and stumbled. Tong Yinshan's palm landed on Wang Yu's chest. One shoulder, one palm. Both of them took a few steps back at the same time. They looked at each other in awe and admiration. Again, good. This time, it was Wang Yu's turn to make the first move. Tong Yinshan slapped Wang Yu's hand away and raised his leg to smash Wang Yu's shoulder. Tong Yunshan's leg wasn't like others. If it landed, it wouldn't feel good. Wang Yu suddenly turned around and removed Tong Yunshan's leg from his shoulder. At the same time, Wang Yu extended his leg and kicked Tong Yunshan's leg. His right arm swung back and hit Tong Yunshan's chest. Tong Yunshan fell to the ground. Wang Yu turned around and raised his leg, wanting to give Wang Yu a taste of his own medicine. Tong Yunshan flipped over and grabbed the leg that Wang Yu was smashing over. At the same time, he stood up and used his shoulder to block, throwing Wang Yu away. Wang Yu used quick recover to land on the ground, and Tong Yunshan pounced over. Wang Yu grabbed onto Tong Yunshan's arm, wanting to perform a reverse knuckle. Tong Yunshan flipped over to Wang Yu's back, grabbed onto Wang Yu's arm, and performed a reverse knuckle. Not to be outdone, Wang Yu used his footwork, turned behind Tong Yunshan, and performed a reverse knuckle. In the end, Tong Yunshan's fist art was exquisite. He pulled his arm down and broke free from Wang Yu. He turned around and slammed his palms on Wang Yu's chest. Wang Yu pushed with all his might, and the two of them took a few steps back. Tai Chi versus 8 trigrams. It all depended on the word skill. Wang Yu and Tong Yunshan were really evenly matched. The two of them fought back and forth, countering each other's moves. Their arms were intertwined together, and like agile snakes, they weaved around their bodies from all kinds of unimaginable angles. Flying General Longcheng and the others were dumbfounded. Although Flying General Longcheng wasn't a martial artist, as soldiers, they had learned martial arts. In addition, they had been with Tong Yunshan for a long time, so they naturally weren't amateurs. At this time, although Wang Yu and Tong Yunshan were only competing in martial arts and didn't use any in-game skills, their moves were not sloppy, showing the demeanor of a grandmaster. Moreover, their punches and kicks were extremely dangerous. If they were in real life, the slightest bit of carelessness could lead to defeat. In particular, the 3 consecutive reverse joints between the two of them just now. No matter who was a little faster or a little slower, it was estimated that they would lose an arm. This kind of battle, let alone a normal person like Flying General Longcheng, even in the martial arts circle, would be an epic battle that could be recorded in textbooks. After 20 minutes, the two of them had exchanged nearly 100 moves, but there was still no clear winner. Fortunately, this was in the game. Otherwise, even if the two of them weren't beaten to the ground, they would still be exhausted. However, because the two of them didn't use any class skills, even though they looked like tigers fighting, their damage was very limited. The two of them didn't lose much health, and instead, they became more and more energetic. After another round, the two of them used quick recover. Wang Yu said in admiration, "Teacher Tong's fist technique is so high. I've never seen a second person like him." Tong Yunshan laughed. "Haha, kid, you're not bad either. Tong, have been unstoppable all my life, and you're the second person to force me into this situation." "Oh, there's such an amazing person in this world." Wang Yu was slightly surprised. Tong Yunshan's fist technique was so high that it was definitely something that Wang Yu had never seen in his life. He didn't think that other than himself, there would be someone who could compete with him. "Haha, silly kid, you can't see the experts far away, but you don't know the ones right in front of you? When you beat me, I'll tell you." Tong Yunshan laughed loudly and rushed forward again. "Can you stop for a moment?" At this moment, Soaring General Long couldn't help but shout, "What's wrong?" Wang Yu and Tong Yunshan stopped and turned their heads to ask. Soaring General Long said gloomily, "Kid, I know you're very strong, but how long are you going to keep fighting like this?" Wang Yu looked at his health, and his face showed an awkward expression. Meow. After fighting for 20 minutes, the two of them had less than a tenth of their health left. Even if they were to grind a boss, there was no way to do so. There was no stamina in the game. If they continued to fight like this, it would be very difficult to determine a winner without 3 days and 3 nights. While they were in a daze, the two of them's health jumped up and returned to full. It seemed that they both had automatic recovery equipment, so it was too difficult to die. "Should we use skills?" Wang Yu asked Tong Yunshan. "Okay." Tong Yunshan nodded and smashed his collapsing fist towards Wang Yu. Wang Yu wanted to jump back to dodge, but Tong Yunshan formed a claw and grabbed Wang Yu's ankle with ferocious tiger strike. Bang! Wang Yu disappeared. Teacher Tong, this is fake. Wang Yu appeared behind Tong Yunshan and slashed at the back of Tong Yunshan's neck with his palm. Bang! Tong Yunshan disappeared. Do you think you're the only one who knows how to do this? Huh? Tong Yunshan laughed loudly and appeared behind Wang Yu. He turned his hands together and condensed a huge wave of qi that hit Wang Yu's head. Boom! Wang Yu and the wave of qi exploded at the same time. Tong Yunshan was forced back a few steps by the explosion. Suddenly, he felt his back go numb and a huge force came over. Under the flash of lightning, Tong Yunshan's health bar was hit by Wang Yu's kick. Because it was a spar, Tong Yunshan's health bar was only empty, but he didn't die. Tong Yunshan was stunned for a moment. He turned around and said to Wang Yu in a daze, "Amazing, amazing. I really am old." Wang Yu said embarrassedly, "Not at all. I just had the advantage of the stats of my equipment." Chapter 758. As the saying goes, the fist is afraid of the young, and the stick is afraid of the old. Regardless of whether it was the internal martial arts or the external martial arts, it was the same principle. Although Tong Yunshan's fist technique was slightly better than Wang Yu's, he was already 50 years old and had long passed his prime. Not to mention that Wang Yu was born with extraordinary strength and was gifted by the heavens. Just the difference in fist technique between the two of them couldn't make up for Tong Yunshan's weakness in physique. Fortunately, this was a game, and there were only attributes and not physical strength. Otherwise, Tong Yunshan would probably be defeated within 50 moves. "You know who I am?" When he heard Tong Yunshan's words, Wang Yu asked in surprise. Just now, Wang Yu used Tai Chi. Everyone who learned martial arts knew how to use Tai Chi. Even if Wang Yu's fist technique was exquisite, Tong Yunshan should have thought that Wang Yu was from the Yang or Qin family. How could he have guessed that he was from the Wang family? Could it be that it was revealed through the fist technique? This was also impossible. Wang Yu was using orthodox Taiji. If Tong Yunshan could even see through this, then Tong Yunshan was simply a god. Of course, Tong Yunshan smiled mysteriously. "Which move did you see that from?" Wang Yu asked curiously. You look exactly the same as your father when he was young. I recognized you the moment I saw you. I already knew you were strong, so I tricked you," Tong Yunshan said. When Wang Yu heard this, he was instantly speechless. Damn, this old man didn't play by the rules. Then as the expert that teacher Tong mentioned, immediately after, Wang Yu asked again. Since Tong Yunshan knew him, then he could easily guess who the expert in front of him was. "That's right, it's your father. Back then, we were both in our prime, and we didn't respect each other. However, after that battle, I didn't respect anyone else," Tong Yunshan said emotionally. "I won't hide it from you." He said that too. When he heard Tong Yunshan say this, Wang Yu suddenly remembered that old Wang had said the same thing. But he said I surpassed him a long time ago. Wang Yu rubbed his chin. "You're still young. Naturally, you won't be at a disadvantage if you fight him. Moreover, he's different from me. He's your father. If he loses to you, he'll lose a lot of face." "Huh." Tong Yunshan laughed heartily. He. Wang Yu rubbed the back of his head and smiled. Tong Yunshan was right. Which martial artist wasn't competitive? Losing to his own son would be too shameful. But it looks like I still lost to him. Tong Yunshan shook his head and said, "To think that my 8 trigram school used to have a long history. Now, I'm the only one left, and Brother Wang's son has already." Sigh. Wang Yu also sighed. For martial arts practitioners, inheritance was a big problem. In a situation like Tong Yunshan's, Wang Yu couldn't even persuade him. Did he have to take the initiative to ask to learn the 8 trigrams palm? That was a taboo, and Wang Yu wasn't that stupid. "What do you think of my martial arts?" Teacher Tong's fist technique is the best I've ever seen in my life, Wang Yu said honestly. "Then, do you want to learn my martial arts?" Tong Yunshan asked. "Elder Tong." Before Wang Yu could speak, Fei Cheng and the others called out before Wang Yu. They looked at Tong Yunshan with eyes full of disbelief. Flying General Longcheng and Tong Yunshan had known each other for a long time. It was Flying General Longcheng who had brought Tong Yunshan to play this game. However, Tong Yunshan had only taught Flying General Longcheng and the others a few moves. After that, no matter how much Flying General Longcheng and the others begged, Tong Yunshan refused to teach them. Who would have thought that Tong Yunshan would take the initiative to teach an outsider? Tong Yunshan glanced at Fei Cheng and the others and said, "It's not that I don't want to teach you, it's that you're too old. Plus, you've been learning martial arts for too long. You can't learn my fist technique." When Fei Cheng and the others heard this, their expressions became gloomy. Indeed, Tong Yunshan had wanted to teach them, but it was easy to change one's power. Fei Cheng and the others had been using brute force for more than 10 years. How could they compare to a genius like Wang Yu, who practiced both internal and external martial arts? Is this okay? Wang Yu didn't know what to do at this moment. With Wang Yu and Tong Yunshan's friendship, Wang Yu wasn't afraid that Wang Yu wouldn't agree. However, if a member of the Wang clan became the disciple of someone else, people would gossip. Tong Yunshan smiled and said, "I know I don't have the qualifications to be your teacher. I'm only passing on martial arts techniques. I don't accept disciples." But Wang Yu was speechless again. Sectarian bias was the tradition of martial arts practitioners. "No buts," Tong Yunshan said. "I'm already so old, but I still don't have any children or disciples. I can't bear to see my ancestors' skills disappear." Sectarian bias should have been abandoned long ago. "Teacher Tong." When Wang Yu heard this, he bowed deeply to Tong Yunshan and said, "I've seen so many martial arts practitioners, but you're the only one who can be considered a grandmaster." "Ha ha ha." Tong Yunshan laughed and said, "If it really doesn't work, it doesn't matter who it is. From the reincarnation guerrilla force. When we meet in a few days, I'll personally teach you. You must practice well." "In a few days?" Wang Yu was puzzled. "What do you mean? Isn't it your grandfather's 100th birthday in a few days?" "I've also received an invitation," Tong Yunshan said. "Ah." When Wang Yu heard this, he was dumbfounded. In the past, when Wang Yu was at home, Wang Yu only cared about eating, drinking, giving gifts, and receiving red packets during his grandfather's birthday. He never remembered the date. Now that Tong Yunshan reminded him, he remembered that the Wang family's grandfather was celebrating his 100th birthday this year. Old Wang had 4 brothers. Old Wang was the third. Although he was not the eldest son, he was the most talented. Therefore, he was made the head of the family. It was the same for Wang Yu. He was the most outstanding among the younger generation and the most loved by the old master. People didn't live for many centuries. As the most outstanding successor, Wang Yu definitely had no reason not to go back. Teacher Tong, I'll be leaving first." Wang Yu cupped his fists at Tong Yunshan, then said to Longcheng and the others, "Let's forget about reaching the pinnacle. I won't be following him if I have something else to do." After saying that, Wang Yu sent a message to reaching the pinnacle, then sent a message to Mu Zixien and went offline. Tong Yunshan was dumbfounded. This child looks quite steady. Why did he suddenly become so rash? After Wang Yu went offline, he hurriedly washed his face and came out of the washroom. Mu Zixien also went offline. She asked Wang Yu, puzzled, "What's wrong? Why are you in such a hurry?" "Wife, pack up. We have to go home." "Go home." Mu Zixian's body trembled. "Are we going back so soon?" Wang Yu nodded and said, "Yes, there's still 3 days until my grandfather's 100th birthday. I have to go back and let you and my family meet." Hee, very excited, right? Chapter 759. Wang Yu and his wife had just moved from being able to live comfortably, so they didn't have much to pack. They just took a few clothes and left the house. Since Li Shui and the others were in the game, they didn't have time to inform them. Wang Yu's house was a bit far from L City, but L City's transportation was very convenient. There was still a train back in the afternoon. After the two got in the car, Wang Yu didn't have anything on his mind. He looked calm, as if he was on a vacation. Mu Zixien, on the other hand, was extremely nervous. She was suddenly pulled home by Wang Yu. Mu Zixien was not prepared at all. It should be known that Mu Zixien and Wang Yu weren't in a proper relationship. Instead, they had gotten married after abducting Wang Yu. Under such circumstances, it was extremely awkward to follow Wang Yu home to meet her family. It couldn't be helped. No matter how ugly a daughter-in-law was, she had to meet her parents-in-law. A marriage without the blessings of parents was not perfect. On the way, Mu Zixin took out a small mirror and looked around. She would touch up her makeup from time to time, afraid that she would leave a bad impression on Wang Yu's parents. Unfortunately, this girl's makeup skills were terrible. In a moment of desperation, she almost changed her appearance beyond recognition. "What are you doing? How did you end up like this?" Wang Yu, who was looking around at the scenery, turned around and was shocked to see Mu Zixin in this state. "Don't I look good?" Mu Zixin pouted and took out her lipstick. Wang Yu covered his face and cried, "You look like a monster. Go wash up." "You bastard." Mu Zixin laughed and punched Wang Yu. The train was still 8 hours away. With nothing to do, Wang Yu took out Mu Zixin's tablet, and the two of them browsed the Rebirth forum. There were many posts on the forum as usual, but this time, the most popular topic was about the Pro League. In the past, the Pro League would be ranked within the season to accumulate points. As long as their points reached a certain level, they could sign up for the competition. This was the norm in the competitive circle. Rebirth was no exception. Most guilds had already started accumulating points the moment the arena opened. However, Chuanjin had only decided to participate in the competition 2 days ago, so they currently had 0 points. There were less than 2 months left until the Pro League. With Quanjun School's lazy attitude toward tournament points, it would be impossible for them to gather enough points. However, Rebirth still took great care of grassroots teams. Other than the arena, there was also a team selection tournament. The threshold for team preliminaries was very low. As long as it was a team, they could sign up. This move of Longting Company was appreciated by most players. For a long time, the professional league had been exclusive to the players of the big guilds. Grassroots players had never had a chance. The Soaring Dragon Company was undoubtedly giving everyone a chance by doing this. Of course, the Soaring Dragon Company and the players understood that there was still a big gap between the grassroots players and the rich and powerful guilds. Even if they were given a chance, they would only be able to quench their thirst at the sight of plum blossoms. However, what everyone wanted was an equal attitude. At this time, the forums were filled with people posting flags, saying that if any team didn't win, they would live stream themselves eating sh*t or analyzing the odds of winning this match, or arguing with their idols for more than 10 pages. It was very lively. However, most of the posts were from teams looking for teammates. They couldn't even find a team in their own main city, which showed how strong these players were. However, the professional league was a national sport, not exclusive to the big guilds. Winning or not, it was important for everyone to participate. What successfully attracted Wang Yu's attention was an official post about the team preliminaries and the professional league. The specific time of the preliminaries had been released. There were less than 10 days from now, and the registration deadline was actually the day before the preliminaries. This time, the preliminaries were divided into 15 divisions according to the main city area. Naturally, Wang Yu's team was in the 7th division. Like the arena, the competition was divided into 3 systems: individual competition, will competition, and team competition. The limit of each team was 12 people, and the maximum number of players was 10. The champion team of each division would be qualified to participate in the knockout round with the 35 teams on the battlefield ranking. The top 20 teams of the knockout round could participate in the National League, and the top 4 teams of the National League could represent China in the regional preliminaries. Currently, Rebirth was divided into 3 main divisions: Asia, Europe, and the Americas. Each division was further divided into regions and servers according to the country. For example, countries like Korea and Japan had their own division. However, there were many Chinese players, and the national server in the Asia division was divided into 15 divisions. The top 2 teams of the regional preliminaries would be qualified to participate in the International League. The winning team would be the world champion, the true number 1 in the world. After reading the post, Wang Yu said to Mu Zixin thoughtfully, I only looked at the competition system, but I can already feel the strong smell of gunpowder. Of course, the competition has always been the cruelest, Mu Zixin said. Then, do you think we have any hope? Wang Yu asked Mu Zixin. Mu Zixin did not answer Wang Yu directly, but said to Wang Yu, before rebirth, Longting Company also had a grassroots team preliminaries for a competitive game. Just like now, there were 15 teams. Oh, what's the result? Wang Yu asked. 15 grassroots teams. None of them survived the first round of the knockout round. Mu Zixin said professional players absolutely suppressed amateurs in terms of strength and tactics. Indeed, there were two types of truly capable players. The first type was those who were capable and ambitious. These types of players were motivated by fame and fortune. Professional teams all had the support of large corporations, so no one would complain about money. The vast majority of capable players were of this type. There was another type of people who were capable but had no ambition. People like Wuji and the others had their own careers and played games for fun. These people didn't have much ambition and weren't short of money. They weren't interested in esports competitions or anything like that. Although there were few of them, they would never play esports. Once these two types of players were eliminated, the ones who were ambitious but not capable would be left behind. Therefore, no matter how strong the grassroots teams were, they would still be left behind after being eliminated. These grassroots players were innately inferior to professional players, not to mention in the future. Professional teams had the support of guilds and funds, while grassroots teams were self-sufficient. The difference was so big that the author could not bear to mention it. If they wanted to win when they were innately inferior, they would have to be extremely lucky. After all, they were not the main characters. If that's the case, then our team isn't that optimistic. Wang Yu rubbed his chin. Chapter 760. Mu Zixin's words were not without reason. Wuji and the others were the second type of capable people. Even though these people were slightly weaker than professional players, as long as they had the right tactics, victory or defeat was still an unknown. Pointing sword to the heavens was a very good test. Moreover, Wang Yu's strength was overwhelming even for professional players. Even if she couldn't beat an entire team by herself, she could still hold off half of an entire team by herself. Therefore, it wasn't impossible for her to become the national champion. Mu Zixin was not ambitious. As a grassroots team, winning the national championship once was enough to deal with the current predicament. However, Wang Yu said disapprovingly, "What's the point of winning the national championship? If you want to win the world championship. The world championship is not as easy as you think." Mu Zixin said dumbfoundedly. Huaxia was not the only country in the world that was powerful in esports. The skincare players on the European server were quite powerful. Even the Stick Nation, which was the size of a palm next door, was a country that stood among the powerful esports countries all year round. It was a very difficult opponent and also Huaxia's biggest opponent in the Asian region. This was not to say that Huaxia's hundreds of millions of players were inferior to Stick Nations, which had less than 1 million players. It was because each country had a limited number of teams. Huaxia was so big that there were as many teams as dogs. The competition was also very competitive. Competitions were like wars, and there was no absolute winner. Any of the 50 teams could have an upset, and even the strongest team could be eliminated. From this, it could be seen that luck was also a part of one's strength. Teams that could win the world championship were heaven-defying existences that had both strength and luck. There had been more than 30 professional leagues in the esports industry, and Huaxia had only won 7 times. As a country that could almost dominate a region, 7 times was not a lot. Wang Yu wanted to win the world championship with a bunch of non-professional players. No matter how one listened to it, it seemed a little far-fetched. It's good that it's not easy. This is a chance to challenge myself. Wang Yu said calmly. His words were filled with strong confidence. Mu Zixin looked at Wang Yu and could not help but feel her heart skip a beat. Her face was filled with a happy smile. Sometimes, women's requirements for their men were very simple. Mu Zixin did not expect Wang Yu to really have a great career. In her heart, Even if Wang Yu was trash, as long as he worked hard and had a heart full of positive energy, it would be enough. When the train arrived at the city where Wang Yu's hometown was located, it was already past 1 o'clock in the morning. Wang Yu's home was not in the city, but in the village below. The two of them rested for the night in a hotel near the train station. The next morning, they took a taxi and continued their journey. The Wang family did not run a martial arts dojo. Compared to the bustling city, the Wang family needed a quiet and elegant environment. Therefore, the Wang family village was located in a very remote location. At first, the taxi driver suspected that he had heard the wrong place. Later, he turned on the GPS and found out that there was such a village. What made the taxi driver even more surprised was that although the Wang family was remote, the transportation was very developed. It was obviously a very remote area, but there was a very wide asphalt road that led directly to the Wang family village. It really opened the taxi driver's eyes. This road was naturally built by the Wang family. The Wang family was a big family with a big business. They could still afford to build such a road. Looking at the scenery along the way, Mu Zixian was filled with emotion. The two of them had not left for long, and they actually came back. When the car passed by a warning sign that said, "Those who are not from the Wang family are prohibited from moving forward," Wang Yu said to the taxi driver, "Just stop here. Is this place okay?" The taxi driver was a little absent-minded. This was the wilderness. Mu Zixian paid the fare, and the two of them jumped out of the car. They passed the warning sign, turned left, and disappeared into the woods by the road. Seeing this scene in broad daylight, the driver had goosebumps. He lowered his head to confirm that the money in his hand was not ghost money. He quickly turned the steering wheel and disappeared without a trace. After passing through the dense forest, Wang Yu and Mu Zixian finally saw the Wang family village. Outside the Wang family village was a moat. There was a bridge over the moat that faced the entrance of the village. On the bridge, an old man was sitting there and basking in the sun. When he saw Wang Yu and Mu Zixian, he walked over and said in a deep voice, "This is a private area, not a scenic area. Visiting is prohibited. Go back to where you came from." The old man's voice was not loud, but it was clearly heard by the two of them. His martial arts cultivation was obviously not low. However, from the meaning of his words, it was obvious that he treated Wang Yu and Mu Zixian as backpackers who ran around with a headache. "Uncle Ming, it's me," Wang Yu replied with a smile when he heard that. The old man who was called Uncle Ming by Wang Yu was stunned when he heard that. He quickly stood up and squinted his eyes to carefully look at Wang Yu. He then rubbed his eyes and said in disbelief, "Wang Lao-san? It's really you? Why did you come back?" Wang Yu still had 2 older male cousins and 2 older female cousins. According to the clan's tradition of ranking the male heirs, he was the 3rd eldest like his father. Only then did Wang Yu realize why Wang Fei, that brat, had laughed so mischievously when he scolded Wang Lao-san. "It's me. It's my grandfather's birthday, so I came back," Wang Yu said with some embarrassment. Running away from home wasn't something to be proud of. Returning home halfway would make one feel like they couldn't survive outside. "It's really you, you little brat. Why didn't you take the main road?" Uncle Ming said with some anger. "How many times have I told you? That small forest is feng shui. If you step on the road, it will leak feng shui." Wang Yu chuckled and said, "Because it's close. You see, it's not easy for me to take care of my family. Please don't tell on me." Vehicles that weren't part of the Wang family were not allowed to pass the warning signs, and the road that led directly to the Wang family required a long detour. There was no need to go around the small forest. At this time, Uncle Ming saw Mu Zixian behind Wang Yu. His expression changed drastically. "Who is this? You know our family's rules." As the person in charge of the Kung Fu Circle, the Wang family had always made many enemies. Therefore, anyone who wasn't a member of the Wang family was forbidden. Even people in the Kung Fu Circle needed an invitation. "My wife, not an outsider," Wang Yu said. Mu Zixian also cautiously called out Uncle Ming. "Wife." Uncle Ming said in surprise. "When did you get married?" "Why didn't I know?" Wang Yu's status in the clan wasn't ordinary. Even a small matter could affect people's hearts. not to mention a lifelong event like marriage. It's fine as long as the country knows. Wang Yu took out his marriage certificate and waved it around with a smile. Uncle Ming, can we go in now? Wang Yu asked. Do you want me to inform your father? Uncle Ming took out a cell phone and asked in a very uncharacteristic manner. This old man was quite up to date. His cell phone was even newer than the two youngsters. Chapter 761. Mu Zixian had only been to the warning line before. This was her first time entering the Wang family village. As soon as she entered the Wang family village, Mu Zixian felt the difference in culture. The Wang family village was filled with ancient buildings. The houses were not tall. The tallest building was only the four-story ancient building in the center of the village. The architectural style was much more pleasing to the eye than the ancient districts in the city that were built to attract tourists, especially the huge courtyards of the Wang family village, which made Mu Zixian dumbfounded. It must be known that the current population of China was more than 2 billion. Even the most remote villages had to reduce the residential area in order to preserve the arable land. Under such circumstances, the Wang family was still able to preserve such a large area of ancient buildings. It was obvious how wealthy they were. If Mu Zixian looked down from the top, she would be surprised to find that there were a total of 8 roads in the Wang family village. With the ancient building as the center, it was very smooth. To be able to build such a village, it was not just a matter of money. It was already noon when they arrived at the Wang family village from the city. At this time, there were not many people on the street. Wang Yu brought Mu Zixian to a big courtyard in the center of the village. As there were no outsiders in the Wang family village, everyone basically did not close their doors. The door of the courtyard was open. Wang Yu pulled Mu Zixian through the corridor and passed through a few doors before arriving in front of a house. This is your house? Mu Zixian asked in surprise. Yes. Wang Yu nodded. So big, Mu Zixian exclaimed. Wang Yu brought Mu Zixian through 4 doors in a row, but they did not reach the end. It could be seen that Wang Yu's courtyard had at least 5 entrances. Not to mention the others, just the gatekeeper at the entrance was much bigger than their house in El City. In this era, where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, there were not many people who could live in such a big house at this time. Mu Zixian finally understood why Yang Na would feel uncomfortable living in such a large house alone. The so-called high-end feng shui house in the high-end district could only be used as a toilet here. After all, Wang Yu once said that the Yang family was the richest among the 4 aristocratic families. This made Mu Zixian involuntarily sigh. Did all martial artists have a natural talent for making money? Just look at Wang Yu. She earned a lot of money just by playing a game. The others probably wouldn't be any worse off. Where is this? Aren't you going to meet your parents first? Mu Zixian asked curiously as she looked at the house in front of her. My room. As Wang Yu spoke, he jumped up lightly and touched the eaves above the door. He found a key. At the same time, Mu Zixian gently pushed the door open. The door isn't locked. Mu Zixian whispered. I clearly locked it when I left. Wang Yu walked into the central room curiously. The house was very clean. Even though Wang Yu had been gone for more than half a year, there was not a speck of dust on it. The wooden floor glistened as if someone cleaned it every day. Is someone living in my house? Wang Yu muttered. Just as he was about to walk into the bedroom, he heard a voice coming from the bedroom. Is that second bro? You can go back first. I'll stay here with your brother for a while. At this moment, Wang Yu lifted the curtains. Mu Zixian saw a middle-aged woman. She was sitting in front of Wang Yu's desk with her eyes closed. The middle-aged woman was not considered beautiful. Her clothes were not luxurious either. However, her aura was very obvious. Mu Zixian had felt this aura before. It was similar to the feeling she had when she saw Wang Yu's father in the game. Mother! Seeing the middle-aged woman, Wang Yu shouted in excitement. When the middle-aged woman heard him, she opened her eyes. After a long pause, she choked and said, Iron Ox, you are back? It was a very plain sentence, but Wang Yu and Mu Zixian could deeply feel the longing, anticipation, surprise, and all sorts of complicated emotions in the words. At this moment, Mu Zixian's tears flowed down her cheeks. As the saying goes, mothers worry about their children when they travel 1,000 miles. Ever since Wang Yu left, there had been no news of him for half a year. Mu Zixian immediately understood how a mother felt. That feeling was as if Wang Yu had suddenly left her. She could empathize with him. At the same time, Mu Zixian also understood how childish her and Wang Yu's actions were. Although love was selfish, family was priceless. There were so many ways to solve a problem. Why did they have to choose the most hurtful one? Mother. Seeing his mother like this, Wang Yu also wanted to cry. Hold it back. A man should not cry easily. Do you know that? Seeing the situation, Wang Yu's mother's eyes turned cold, and she said sternly. Wang Yu immediately stood still and pulled Mu Zixian, saying, "This is my mother." Mother! Mu Zixian called out softly with guilt in her heart. Wang Yu's mother looked at Mu Zixian and asked Wang Yu coldly, "Who is this?" "My wife. We have been married for more than half a year," Wang Yu said happily. Hearing this, Wang Yu's mother's eyes tightened and her hands clenched into fists. However, she was still the child of a big family. Even if she saw the culprit who had kidnapped her son in front of Wang Yu's mother did not choose to embarrass Wang Yu. Instead, she softly said, "Oh." Then, she politely nodded at Mu Zixian. Seeing Wang Yu's mother so cold, Mu Zixian secretly sighed. There was no other way. In this situation, no one would have a good attitude. Mu Zixian was already mentally prepared. After all, he was the child of her heart. Marriage was such a big thing, and his parents did not know about it. If it was anyone else, they would have been angry. Of course, Wang Yu's mother was more afraid that Wang Yu would leave without saying goodbye again. Just as Mu Zixian was about to say a few words of apology, Wang Yu's mother looked at the time and said, "You haven't eaten, right? You came at the right time. Everyone is here. If there is anything, we can talk after eating." Wang Yu's mother's aura was even stronger than old Wang's. There was an unquestionable feeling about her. Okay. Wang Yu and Mu Zixian nodded and followed behind Wang Yu's mother. Through another door, they arrived at the dining room. The fat Wang Fei, evildoers run wild, was stuffing food into his mouth when he heard the sound outside the door. He immediately sat up straight. Seeing Wang Yu and the other two enter the room, Wang Fei first looked at Wang Yu and his family in surprise, then looked at his mother in fear. Wang Yu's mother glanced at the table, then looked sternly at Wang Fei, who had oil dripping from the corner of his mouth, and asked, "Where is your father?" "Playing games." Seeing that his mother did not pursue the matter of him stealing food, Wang Fei hurriedly wiped his mouth and sold out his father. Wang Yu and Mu Zixian were stunned. Initially, they thought that old Wang was playing games to cause trouble. They did not expect the old man to be addicted to it. Hearing Wang Fei say that, Wang Yu's mother's expression became even colder. She frowned and said, "Call him over." I'll go." When Wang Yu and Wang Fei saw their mother's expression, they were scared out of their wits. They fought to be the first to run out. Chapter 762. "I was at home," Wang Yu quickly replied. "Oh, you're here too." Old Wang turned around and saw Mu Zixian. He waved at her. Mu Zixian stood there awkwardly, not knowing how to address him. Logically speaking, Mu Zixian should call him father. However, the last time they met, the two of them had not been very happy. Lao Wang had not been able to say anything about whether or not he would acknowledge her as his daughter-in-law. Thus, Mu Zixian was a little conflicted at this time. "Quick, sit down. Why don't you greet us?" "Luckily, I didn't prepare any red packets." Old Wang scratched his head and mumbled. He was about to sit down by himself. Just then, Wang Yu's mother stepped sideways and kicked old Wang's chair to the foot of the wall. "Aihua, stop fooling around. The children are watching." Old Wang's face turned red. He glanced at Wang Yu and the other two, then said softly, "You also know that the children are here? You're almost 50 years old, yet you play games every day. Don't you feel ashamed?" Wang Yu's mother said angrily. However, she didn't show her emotions too much and left some face for old Wang. Needless to say, those who have been married before, readers with girlfriends, if you don't have a girlfriend, please accept my sarcasm. Everyone knew that a woman's biggest enemy was online games. When faced with a husband who was addicted to games, there weren't many women like Wang Yu's mother who could control her temper. Old Wang glanced at Mu Zixian and said, "Hee hee, I'm just playing. If there's anything, let's talk in private. Leave me some face." "Oomph." Wang Yu's mother sighed helplessly. She gestured to everyone and said, "Sit down." When everyone heard this, they sat down quietly like kindergartners, especially Mu Zixian. She was completely stunned by Wang Yu's mother's imposing manner. It seemed that the person with the most authority in the Wang family was someone else. It was no wonder that Wang Yu's personality was so dull. Chinese people usually discuss things at the dining table. Wang Yu's mother and Wang Yu hadn't seen each other for many years, so naturally, she had a lot to talk about. "Iron Ox, where have you been these days? How's the food? How's the clothing? How have you been?" Questions like these came out one after another. Wang Yu's answer was also very comprehensive. He went to a small city where he could eat and wear well and had a wife to support him. Although his life was a little tight, it was more comfortable than at home. Sigh. Hearing Wang Yu's answer, Wang Yu's mother sighed thoughtfully. Then, she asked Lao Wang, "Do you know this girl?" Wang Yu's mother saw how old Wang greeted Mu Zixian the moment he came in. "Yes, the little girl is not bad. As long as boss is happy," Lao Wang said and raised his eyebrows at Wang Yu with a smile. Wang Yu secretly rejoiced. Although her mother had the most say in the family, the final decision was usually made by her father. Since her father had already said so, her mother wouldn't make things too difficult for her. "I've also seen sister-in-law. She's very nice." Wang Fei was quick-witted. He took the opportunity to add a sentence. Wang Yu's mother saw that Lao Wang and Wang Fei were both praising Mu Zixian. She was a little surprised and asked, "Why have you all seen her, but not me?" "You don't play games," Lao Wang said. "See her in the game?" Wang Yu's mother was a little angry. Games, games. The thing that the family talked about the most was games. "Yes, you don't know, right? That game is really fun. It's just like the real thing," Lao Wang said as if he was showing off. Wang Yu's mother squinted her eyes and looked at Lao Wang. Lao Wang quickly shut up. Then, Wang Yu's mother asked Mu Zixian, "Little Mu, right?" Mu Zixian quickly replied, "Yes. You can call me Xian Er." "Xian Er, thank you for taking care of my boss. Where's your family from?" Wang Yu's mother asked. Mu Zixian said truthfully, "My parents live in the city. They are employees of state-owned enterprises." Wang Yu was also clear about Mu Zixian's situation. Compared to the Wang family, her family background could not be any more ordinary. "Oh," Wang Yu's mother nodded and asked, "Then what do you do now?" When Wang Yu's mother said this, there was an instant silence. Even Mu Zixian didn't know how to answer. From the conversation just now, Mu Zixian already knew that Wang Yu's mother was jealous and hated games. Since ancient times, the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law had been very mysterious. Between the two of them, there was also the matter of the abduction of Wang Yu. It could be considered grudge. If she were to say that she played games now, Mu Zixian seemed to have imagined what would happen to Wang Yu's mother if she told the truth. But in this kind of situation, was it appropriate not to tell the truth? Mu Zixian thought about it and finally said, "I opened a grocery store in the game. I'm considered a professional gamer." "Another game?" Wang Yu's mother's attitude turned cold again. "Then what about Iron Ox? He's a man. He can't be living off a woman, right?" Wang Yu said, "I play games too. I'm very good." Crack. As soon as Wang Yu finished speaking, the chopsticks in Wang Yu's mother's hand broke. Wang Yu's mother's veins bulged as she asked Wang Yu, "Do you still know who you are?" Wang Yu was indifferent. Wang Yu's mother asked again, "You are the successor of the Wang family, but now you have fallen to playing games to make a living. Do you think that's appropriate?" Wang Fei also lowered his head. "As the head of the Wang family, you are addicted to games and not studying. Who do you think you are doing right?" Old Wang put down his bowl and chopsticks. "That's right. As the future hope of the martial arts world, Wang Yu shouldered the heavy responsibility of passing on and continuing the legacy. Even if Wang Yu didn't have a right to pass on his skills to the next generation, he had to at least start from himself and diligently study martial arts. As for money, the Wang family had such a large family business. In the eyes of conservatives like Wang Yu's mother, it was tantamount to letting down the ancestors by indulging in games. This was also the reason why she was extremely opposed to Lao Wang playing games. "Mom, you're wrong." Just as Wang Yu's mother was about to continue scolding him, Wang Yu suddenly said, "Mom, you're wrong." "Really? What did I do wrong?" Wang Yu's mother asked angrily when she saw that Wang Yu dared to talk back to her. Wang Yu said, "I am me, not a tool. I think I should have my own thoughts." "You're a kid. What thoughts do you have?" Wang Yu's mother asked. Old Wang and his wife's train of thought was surprisingly similar. Wang Yu said, "I want to live a normal life. I don't want to be born with so much pressure." "But you're from the Wang family." "I know, but you don't know." "I'd rather not be from the Wang family." Wang Yu said, "Ever since I can remember, I've never lived the life I wanted. Practicing martial arts is everything to me. Even my marriage was forced by you guys. Don't you think people like that are pitiful? What's the difference between me and a machine?" Chapter 763. Most parents in the world thought that forcing their unfulfilled dreams on their children was for their own good. Wang Yu's mother was no exception. Not to mention that Wang Yu was an extremely talented person. Even if Wang Yu's talent was average, Wang Yu's mother probably wouldn't give up. "I feel that if it was for my own good, then I should become a person with my own thoughts and not a machine without any thoughts." Wang Yu said calmly, "Leaving home for half a year, life is a bit difficult, but I am very relaxed and comfortable." Wang Yu's mother, who was originally angry because she was contradicted, immediately softened when she heard Wang Yu's last sentence. "You would rather live a hard life outside than go home?" Wang Yu's mother asked. "It's not hard. I think it was my happiest days." As Wang Yu said this, he turned his head and looked at Mu Zixin. At the same time, Mu Zixin also turned her head and looked at Wang Yu. The two of them smiled, their faces brimming with happiness. "You don't like to practice martial arts?" "I do, but I want to practice martial arts as fun, not pressure." Wang Yu said. "Fun?" Wang Yu's mother was puzzled. "Practicing martial arts is hard. How can there be fun?" Wang Yu said, "The feeling of practicing martial arts in the game is fun. It's much better than practicing martial arts behind closed doors." "Really?" Wang Yu's mother was a bit lost in thought. "Of course," Old Wang said excitedly. "There were many strong monsters in the game. It was much more interesting than hitting wooden dummies." "All right." Hearing Old Wang say this, Wang Yu's mother's expression eased up. She looked at Mu Zixin again and said, "When did you get married?" "More than half a year." Mu Zixin said. "Sigh, you don't have a child yet, right?" "No." "Fortunately, there's still time," Wang Yu's mother said faintly. "What do you mean?" Hearing what Wang Yu's mother said, everyone was in an uproar. Especially Mu Zixin. Her face had turned pale. There was still time. Could it be that he was going to force the two of them to divorce? "Mother, it wasn't easy for me to muster up the courage to go home. Don't force me," Wang Yu exclaimed. Old Wang said from the side, "Ahua, don't be like this. It's fine as long as boss is happy. Don't you know his temper? What you're doing is absolutely useless. In any case, I'm a cripple now. I can't bear the hardships of training. If my brother gets kicked out, I can't bear any responsibility," Wang Fei said. "What are you talking about?" Wang Yu's mother was dumbfounded. "What I mean is, let them hold another wedding ceremony. It's not our family style to do something so unclear." As she spoke, Wang Yu's mother took off a large gold ring from her hand and stuffed it into Mu Zixin's hands. "You came in a hurry, so I didn't prepare anything. Take this." "Thank you, mother." Mu Zixin was overjoyed as she took the ring and said with a red face. Old Wang stretched out his hand and took off the gold ring from Wang Yu's mother's other hand. He handed it over and said, "I didn't prepare anything either." Mu Zixin was speechless. Mu Zixin took the ring, and the atmosphere at the dining table became much more harmonious. Although Wang Yu's mother's views were not so easily changed, at least she reluctantly accepted Mu Zixin. Old Wang was much easier to talk to. He stretched his head out and happily went to Wang Yu's side. He asked, "Boss, I saw the system announcement. You seem to have created a divine weapon?" "Hee hee." Wang Yu chuckled and said, I'm sorry. How was my performance just now? Old Wang asked Wang Yu. Wang Yu said, Father, you are wise. Then how about you give me a weapon? Old Wang said excitedly. Sure, I'll prepare the materials myself. My materials are all from second brother. Wang Yu nodded in agreement. This was his biological father. How could Wang Yu dare to not agree? Okay. Old Wang turned to Wang Fei and said, Second brother, go and get me the materials. Make them the same as your brothers. Father, don't trick me. Wang Fei wanted to cry when he heard this. Wang Yu only needed to open the operating table and do a few things. At most, it would take some time, but the materials were definitely real hard currency. Do you know how much it would cost to get the same materials as Wang Yu's? Why don't you make one for me? Old Wang stared at him. All right, brother, make me a knife too. The multi-purpose kind, Wang Fei said while crying. Wang Yu said, oh, how is it multi-purpose? Not only can it kill people, but it can also commit suicide. Everyone was speechless. After returning home, life could no longer be the same as before, staying in the game day after day. After eating, Wang Yu naturally brought his wife to the old man's place to greet him. Due to Wang Yu's return, Lao Wang and Wang Fei had no choice but to give up on the game and follow Wang Yu to visit her immediate family, uncles, to greet them. After all, Wang Yu's status was still there. If he got a wife, he could not even have a voice. That would be disrespectful to everyone. The Wang family's old man knew about Wang Yu long ago, so his attitude towards Mu Zixian was far better than the others. As for Wang Yu's uncles and their families, they were quite dissatisfied with Wang Yu marrying an ordinary person. However, the old man didn't say anything, so what they said didn't matter. The next day, Mu Zixian brought Wang Yu and Wang Yu's parents and siblings back to their home in the city. It was the first time the two elders had met. Mu Zixian didn't talk to her parents about Wang Yu's family background, but her parents had met Wang Yu before and knew that Wang Yu was a reliable person. They were quite satisfied with Wang Yu. Wang Yu's family was rather low-key. When they introduced themselves, they only said that they were from a village in the suburbs. As for Wang Yu's village identity, Mu Zixian's parents didn't have the snobbish view of others. Instead, they said, as long as the children are happy. Mu Zixian's father even patted old Wang's shoulder and said, Brother, if you have any difficulties, just say it. Save the betrothal gifts if you can. We don't need those useless things. Old Mu's words made Wang Yu's parents feel too ashamed to show their faces. Look at these parents. The third day after they returned home was the old man's 100th birthday. It was also a big event for the Wang family and even the entire Kung Fu circle. Nowadays, the Kung Fu circle was declining. Every old person was a treasure. A centenarian like Old Wang was a living Kung Fu dictionary. Old people of this level could be said to be the Mount Tai and the Big Dipper in the hearts of all martial arts practitioners. Therefore, this birthday banquet wasn't just for the people of the various aristocratic families. As long as it was a famous martial arts practitioner in the Kung Fu circle, they would receive an invitation. Even the government had sent a congratulatory gift. Centenarians received a special allowance from the government. Moreover, Old Wang had participated in the compilation of military combat teaching materials. He was considered a person who had made contributions. Chapter 764. The old master's birthday was the most important event for the Wang family. Most of the people who came today were people from the Kung Fu circle. Although there weren't many people in the Kung Fu circle, there were still more martial artists from all over the country gathered together than there were pandas. Moreover, most of them were old people. It couldn't be helped. There was a shortage of young people who practiced martial arts, so the inheritance was broken. Even the 4 aristocratic families were in danger, let alone the small sects and schools. These old men weren't like some young kids. They were all seniors of virtue and prestige. They needed the Wang family's master to personally receive them. As the master and the successor of the Wang family, Wang Yu naturally couldn't run away. Since morning, Wang Yu, his father, and his 2 uncles began to receive guests from all over the country. Even though they were martial artists, Wang Yu's forehead was sweating after a few hours. Finally, when it was almost 11 o'clock, all the guests arrived. After a series of birthday congratulations, it was time for the banquet. Wang Yu was pulled by old Wang to the main seat facing the door of the auditorium. Seeing the people sitting there, Wang Yu suddenly felt awkward. The people sitting there were all people from the martial arts world. Those who could sit in the main seat must be the leading figures in the martial arts world. Not only did they need to have high attainments in kung fu, they also needed to have a strong background. When Wang Yu was 18, his attainments in kung fu had already reached the level of a grandmaster. In addition to his identity as the Wang family's young master, he was qualified to sit in this position. Other than the two generations of Wang family's masters and Wang Yu, there were also a few seniors who were a few years younger than the Wang family's old master. The ones who made Wang Yu feel uneasy were the few people at the end of the seats. They were none other than the clan heads of the other three great clans. These three old men were the same age as Wang Yu's uncle. The three white-haired old men were staring at Wang Yu at this time, and their expressions were slightly unpleasant. Wang Yu had practiced martial arts for many years and was very sensitive to killing intent. Although these three old men did not have much killing intent, the pressure directed at Wang Yu made Wang Yu a little restless. The young master of the Wang family is as graceful as ever. I wonder where he has been for the past half a year. At this moment, an old man with a long beard stared at Wang Yu and asked. This was the current head of the Li family, Li Wenhao. This old man's temper was the same as his martial arts, giving people the feeling of a soaring dragon and roaring tiger, like a galloping horse. Wang Yu said with some embarrassment, "I'm going out to relax. I'm going to relax. My poor granddaughter isn't in such a good mood." Sigh. Although Li Wenhao's words sounded like he was sighing, his tone wasn't like that. It was obvious that he wanted an explanation from Wang Yu. This wasn't because old Li was narrow-minded and didn't want to let Wang Yu go. After all, as a martial arts practitioner, face was very important. In order to show off, old Wang had boasted, but in the end, he stood others up. They were all in the same circle and were of virtue and prestige. To be left behind like this, and be able to sit at the table and talk nicely proved that their manners were not bad. Yeah, my granddaughter left home because of this and didn't come back for the new year, an old man with long eyebrows said with squinted eyes as he stroked his beard. This old man was Yang Na's grandfather, Yang Daoyuan. Brother Wang, you can't do this kind of thing just because you're talented. Don't bully the young because they're poor. My granddaughter said that the river flows east for 30 years, then west for 30 years. The Chen family's old man, Chen Mingchuan, also glared at Wang Yu. This old man must have loved to read fantasy novels when he was young. The three old men were all elites among elites. How could a child like Wang Yu, who had yet to experience worldly affairs, be able to control them? The three old men's words immediately caused Wang Yu to be at a loss of what to do. He didn't know what to say. Old Wang hurriedly tried to smooth things over. Brothers, little Yu is young and ignorant. If there's a problem, come at me, come at me. Brother Tianlong, he's still young and has seniority. You can't make the decision. Chen Mingchuan glanced at old Wang. He emphasized the word brother and directly made old Wang swallow his words. However, just as Wang Yu's face turned red, great-grandfather suddenly said, "Xiao Yu, go and sit at the same table as the young people." Is this appropriate? Wang Yu was overjoyed. How was it inappropriate? Hurry up and scram. The old master glared at Wang Yu, and Wang Yu immediately fled to Wang Fei's side. He pulled a stool over and sat down. Old man, what is the meaning of this? Seeing that the old man had chased Wang Yu away, the other three family heads had no place to vent their anger. The three old men looked at the old man, dumbfounded. They were obviously unhappy. The old man's temper was very bad. He glared at the three and said, "You three brats, stop talking nonsense. Are you trying to cause trouble on my birthday banquet?" TSK, TSK. There were not many people who could point at the three old men and call the brats. Seeing the old man's anger, the three old men trembled and hurriedly apologized. "You misunderstood. I was just joking with my little brother." "Joking my ass. I already know about your matter. This is not your fault. When the guests have left, go to the Wang family's martial library and see if there's anything you like." In the future, we can all inherit it together. The old man curled his lips. Hearing the words, Martial Library, not only the three old men, but even the old men beside them had their eyes lit up. When they heard the words, inherit it together, their faces revealed a shocked expression. The martial library was the place where the best martial arts of each sect were stored. Don't think that Wang Yu knew all kinds of martial arts. Those were things used by the aristocratic families to communicate with each other. It was an outer sect martial art. The real essence was not something that anyone could casually take out. For example, if Wang Yu had not seen Yang Na use the 7 steps astral dipper of the Yang family, he would never know it in this lifetime. As for inheriting it together, the meaning was even more obvious. From now on, everyone could pass down the martial arts to their descendants, and it would become part of their family's martial arts. The old man was indeed generous. Really? The 3 old men heard the old man's words and grinned from ear to ear. Nonsense. Do you think an old man like me would spout nonsense? However, this is between the children. You can't talk too much. The old man squinted his eyes and pinched the bead in the dragon head's mouth into a pancake. We know. The 3 old men hurriedly sat up straight and said, not to mention that the old man had already given up the inheritance. Even if the old man forced them to shut up, they would at most be displeased. Of course, everyone still had to be reasonable. The old man had threatened them with his martial arts and tempted them with the inheritance. How could the 3 old men still dare to talk nonsense? However, the old man was really pitiful. He was already so old, but he still had to clean up the mess of his son and grandson. What a pitiful parent. Chapter 765. Just as Wang Yu sat down on a stool, he suddenly felt a few murderous auras. Although they weren't as fierce as the 3 old men just now, the murderous aura was much heavier. Wang Yu looked in the direction of the sound in confusion and saw a very beautiful girl staring at him. There were a few young men beside the girl, and their eyes were full of hostility. Who is this girl? Don't you welcome me? Wang Yu asked Wang Fei in a low voice. Li Yujia, Wang Fei replied. F***CK. Wang Yu cursed under his breath and almost fell to the ground. Li Yujia, the granddaughter of the Li family, was also the most talented descendant of the Li family. Not only was her martial arts extremely high, but she was also beautiful. She was one of the most popular girls in the circle, and countless young masters of the martial arts world were her followers. What made Wang Yu feel even more awkward was that this girl was the first marriage that old Wang arranged for Wang Yu back then, and whether it was her family background or talent, she was the most suitable one. Such a proud girl had so many people chasing after her, but Wang Yu couldn't even be bothered to see her face and directly ran away. One could imagine Li Yujia's mood. Now that they met, Li Yujia almost came up to slap Wang Yu and interrogate him. As for the other young men, needless to say, they were the young masters of the aristocratic families who were chasing after Li Yujia. These guys could only glare at Wang Yu angrily. After all, their family background was not as good, and they couldn't beat him in a fight. The behavior of these people made Wang Yu sigh. Were they going to help the goddess, teach him a lesson? They were all tall, rich, and handsome, but why did they do things that losers would do? It was really getting worse with each generation. After knowing Li Yujia's identity, Wang Yu's mood now was as if he had been caught red-handed, and it was even more awkward than before. Hi, hello. Wang Yu greeted Li Yujia in a friendly voice. Oof, you're Wang Yu? Li Yujia saw Wang Yu's appearance and asked with a snort of disdain. It's me, Wang Yu said. Regarding the matter between us, I'm very... Just as Wang Yu was about to apologize, who knew that Li Yujia would sneer and say, what can happen between us? Why are you apologizing to me? Wang Yu was stunned and didn't know what to say. Then Li Yujia said, be careful. We haven't even gotten engaged yet, and I didn't want you in the first place. Don't take yourself too seriously. That's good. Wang Yu wiped his sweat. As long as he could resolve this matter, he didn't care who dumped who. What do you mean? Wang Yu's relief seemed to have hit Miss Li's sore spot again. Li Yujia said angrily, what's wrong? You think I'm not good enough for you? No, since everyone doesn't care about this matter, you don't have to be so murderous. Wang Yu quickly said. Li Yujie snorted coldly. Humph. It's easy to say, but you're not the one who's the laughingstock. Then what do you want to do? Wang Yu was helpless. Li Yujie said, You chase me first, then I'll kick you, and then we'll be even. Everyone at the table was stunned when they heard this. Li Yujie was indeed a strange woman. Such a strange idea was definitely not something an ordinary person could think of. Are you kidding me? I have a wife. Wang Yu refused without thinking. Hearing Wang Yu say this, Li Yujie was furious. She pointed at Wang Yu and asked, Who? Which wild girl did you marry? Do you think you can compare with me? It's none of your business. Wang Yu saw Li Yujie's rude words, and his face immediately turned cold. Wang Yu apologized because he felt guilty, but Li Yujie dared to insult Mu Zixian. Wang Yu absolutely couldn't tolerate it. Fortunately, Wang Yu knew that this Miss Li was just used to being domineering and didn't have any ill intentions. Otherwise, even if she was a woman, he would have given her a slap. Li Yujie had been surrounded wherever she went since she was young. When she saw Wang Yu speak to her like this, she immediately stood up and wanted to beat him up. Wang Fei quickly went up and comforted her. Sister Yu, ignore him. He messed up his brain from practicing martial arts. I'm not married either. What do you think of me? I'm better at doting than him. Get lost, Fatty Wang. Why are you meddling? At this time, a few other young men also stood up and began to criticize Wang Fei. What the heck? He was profiting from a burning house. Did he want to keep the goodies within the family? How could he do things like this? All of you scram. Li Yujie waved her hand to disperse Wang Fei and the others. She pointed at Wang Yu and said, Wang, let me tell you, I'm just this competitive. Do you dare let your wife come out? I want to see how she's stronger than me. Fine, this girl really had a complicated temper. The relationship between people was very subtle. It wasn't just because you were strong that others should like you. Otherwise, what was the difference between you and an animal? At this time, a voice said, as the saying goes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. If others like you, they can tolerate all your shortcomings. If they don't like you, no matter how outstanding you are, they won't take it to heart. Is there a need to compare who's better? Wang Yu quickly turned around and saw Mu Zixian walking over from behind. Hey, aren't you with Mom? Why are you here? Wang Yu asked in surprise. Mu Zixian was a female member of the Wang family. According to the rules, she had her own seat and was not with the guests. Mu Zixian smiled and said, Seeing that it's so lively here, I came over to take a look. Who is she? Li Yujie stared at Wang Yu and asked, My sister-in-law. Wang Fei rushed to introduce her. You're his wife? Li Yujie sized up Mu Zixian and said, Which family are you from? Why haven't I seen you before? There weren't many young people in the martial arts circle who persisted in passing down their inheritance. There were even fewer girls who persisted in learning martial arts. Li Yujie was a competitive person. If the person in front of her was stronger than her, she would definitely remember it. Mu Zixian said in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing, I've never seen you before either. I don't belong to any sect. I'm not someone in your circle. Huh. Li Yujie laughed when she heard that. Wang, I thought you had good taste. I never expected you to find an ordinary person as your wife. You're too useless. It had to be said that many martial arts practitioners had a sense of superiority. In their eyes, finding an ordinary person as a wife was no different from finding a monkey as a wife, much less passing down their family's martial arts to an ordinary person. When Li Yujie said this, the disdain in his words was obvious. Even Wang Fei couldn't stand it anymore. Wang Yu's eyes turned cold. He wanted to say something, but at the same time, a heavy voice said, Hee, are martial arts practitioners superior, or is your Li family superior? At such a young age, the sectarian bias is already so strong. No wonder it's getting harder and harder to pass down martial arts. Following that, a middle-aged man turned around from a neighboring seat. When Wang Yu saw that person's appearance, he was immediately delighted. Chapter 766. People who practice martial arts usually like to use their fists and feet. Young people were impatient, so they were no exception. The Wong family seemed to be prepared for this. After all, everyone lived in the underworld. Who didn't have a few enemies? Even in the Wong family's territory, there were people who would fight if they didn't agree with each other. Soon, the Wong family members who were in charge of public security noticed the situation. They quickly walked over and separated the two parties. The few young people naturally didn't dare to behave atrociously in the venue. Instead, they pointed at the middle-aged man and said, "Old thing, do you dare to come out and exchange a few moves with me?" The middle-aged man wasn't angry at the young people's provocation. Instead, he smiled and said, "Kids, watch your manners. I'm not an old thing. My name is Tong Yin Shan. I don't care if you're Tong Yin Shan or Tong Yin Hai. I'm asking you if you dare." The young man was still arrogant. However, as soon as he finished speaking, the surroundings immediately quietened down. He was most afraid of the sudden silence. Seeing so many people looking at him as if he was a dead man, the young man was stunned. He said in fear, "Who did you say you were?" "Tong Yin Shan. I didn't give you any advice." Tong Yin Shan cupped his fists and asked the few young people. The few young people looked at each other, and their faces turned pale. My goodness, Tong Yin Shan. Who in the martial arts world doesn't know of this master's reputation of being unrivaled in the world? Not to mention in the Kung Fu circle, even in Wang Yu's table, none of these young fellows could defeat him. Wouldn't it be courting death to go against this master? The weather is good today. Master Tong is here for a walk. The few young people first sized up Tong Yin Shan in fear, then they hurriedly returned to their seats. That's right. I'm quite happy to see you young people so energetic, Tong Yin Shan said with a smile. As Tong Yin Shan didn't have any disciples, he was very happy to see the younger generation of the Kung Fu circle. However, the few young people were frightened. They thought that Tong Yin Shan wanted to spar with them, so they hurriedly apologized. "Master Tong, please forgive us, humph, a bunch of useless things." Seeing his lackeys cower in an instant, Li Yujie glared angrily at them. Then, he stood up and said, "So you're Senior Tong. I heard that your 8 trigram school doesn't care about sectarian views. I'm afraid that your lineage is going to end soon." The Li family was not a small sect. Others might be afraid of Tong Yin Shan, but Li Yujie was from the Li family, so of course he wasn't afraid. However, when they heard Li Yujie's words, everyone in the surroundings gasped. Even the Li family's patriarch, who was sitting nearby, felt a chill run down his back. As the saying goes, don't expose a person's shortcomings. Even though Li Yujie was a woman, her words were vicious. Everyone knew about the decline of the 8 trigram school. Saying such words now was like stabbing a knife into Tong Yin Shan's heart. Women were indeed not to be trifled with. Tong Yin Shan laughed and said, This little girl's words are really sharp. This old man's face is really red from embarrassment." Humph. Forcing herself to smile, Li Yujie snorted coldly. Tong Yin Shan shook his head and said with a wry smile, "It's because I've suffered from it that I'm now extremely opposed to sectarian views." "Then why don't you do something about it?" Li Yujie saw that Tong Yin Shan was jumping into a pit, so she hurriedly added insult to injury. "Of course." Tong Yin Shan smiled faintly. He picked up a yellow cloth bundle beside him and walked to the side of the chair. The 8 trigram school's master, Tong Yin Shan, came late and didn't have the time to give you a congratulatory gift. This is just a small token of my respect. With that said, Tong Yin Shan handed the yellow cloth bundle to Old Wang. Old Wang then stood up and passed it to Patriarch Wang. When Patriarch Wang and the others in the chair saw the 8 trigrams bronze mirror embroidered on the yellow cloth bundle, they were instantly stunned. It was the 8 trigrams mirror. This was the 8 trigrams school's legacy token. Every school had a legacy token, and the 8 trigrams mirror was undoubtedly the 8 trigram school's testimony for thousands of years. Tong Yin Shan had given the 8 trigrams mirror to the Wang family, so the item in the bundle was naturally self-evident. Didn't this mean that the 8 trigrams school's legacy would belong to the Wang family? After a long while, Patriarch Wang sighed and said, "Sigh, Sect Master Tong, I can't accept this gift. Tong Yunshan said, if you can't accept it, no one can. Can I know the reason? Patriarch Wang asked with great puzzlement. It wasn't only Patriarch Wang. Everyone else had questions written all over their faces. Although the 8 trigram school was on the decline, it was once a large school, so its heritage was undoubtedly very deep. Furthermore, with Tong Yunshan's attainments in fist techniques at the Grandmaster level, there was no need for him to cling onto the Wang family. To a school, legacy was the most precious thing. There had to be a reason for him to give it away just like that. Tong Yunshan pointed at Wang Yu, who was not far away, and said, a few days ago, I met Brother Iron Ox and lost him. It's truly rare for someone to have such attainments in martial arts at such a young age. By the time it reached me, the 8 trigram school no longer has a successor. In order to continue the lineage, I naturally have to set aside my sectarian views and pass on the legacy of my ancestor. What? This kid even defeated Tong Yunshan? Upon hearing Tong Yunshan's words, everyone was astonished. Indeed, the new generation surpassed the old. Even Tong Yunshan, who was undefeatable in the world, had been defeated. The phrase, undefeatable in the present age, was not just for show. You'd better think carefully. This is something that belongs to your 8 trigram school. Patriarch Wang said in disbelief. Tong Yunshan said, I've thought about it long ago. Martial arts is about the legacy, not the sect. As long as we can carry forward the legacy left behind by our ancestors, it doesn't matter who the successor is. Why should we care so much about it? Almost everyone present, including Grandpa Wang, was stunned by Tong Yunshan's words. Of course, most of them were cursing him in their hearts. Only a few felt the same way. The more people studied martial arts, the faster it would develop. If it was entangled in the sect, it would eventually decline. Why was martial arts abandoned by others? Most of the time, it was because martial arts practitioners had a self-respecting attitude. Only when the entire country, or even the world, understood the culture of martial arts would the path of martial arts flourish. Although setting aside sectarian views and giving the legacy to others would not achieve the effect of promoting martial arts, Tong Yunshan had taken a historic step forward. The younger generation might not be able to feel the stagnation of martial arts, but the elders in the main hall could. When they heard Tong Yunshan's words, they lowered their heads, unsure of what to say. Teacher Tong, why don't you sit in the main hall? Patriarch Wang pointed at Wang Yu's seat and said in admiration, there's no need for that. I still want to catch up with Brother Iron Ox. With that said, Tong Yunshan cupped his fists at the seniors in the main hall before sitting down next to Wang Yu. Li Yujie was even more shocked by Tong Yunshan. She never thought that Tong Yunshan would have the courage to give away the inheritance. After all, this kind of thing was incomparably precious. No matter how much money you spent, you might not be able to buy it. Teacher Tong, I'm really sorry about what I said just now. Li Yujie quickly got up and apologized when she saw Tong Yunshan return. Tong Yunshan waved it off and said, it doesn't matter. What you said was the truth. You must study hard. Following that, Tong Yunshan turned around and patted Wang Yu on the shoulder. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.